Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today we are gonna see, what if Naruto was nominated by a Nara's Gambit, Naruto x Temari. Before we start, please join my Patreon page to watch latest 18+ content. Now let's begin. Just hang on. Naruto just huffed and shook his head with a tired smile at his sensei's constant nonchalant behavior even during times like this. You could count on him whipping out his porn during some major battle. Naruto's bruised and battered body needed serious attending to, so for the safety of Naruto he needed to be carried. Naruto had his arms around his shoulders while Kakashi held him up. Naruto closed his eyes to let the tiring sensation set in. Fighting pain really pushed his body to the limit, but thankfully the fox's regeneration abilities were kicking in, only to harm him in the end, spending more and more off his precious chakra. As his eyes closed, his other senses heard the murmuring of crowds ahead. Naturally, his mind never processed the thought that the crowds of villagers and shinobi were waiting for him. His thoughts ranged to the many possibilities that would cause the entire populace of Konoha to wait outside the semi-protective tents and huts set up for the now homeless villagers. But when Kakashi carried Naruto over a small hill, even though Kakashi already saw the masses earlier, it was still a sight to see. All Naruto could see over the lush plains was every single villager, cheering, and shouts good praises were sent to him. "Welcome back, we believed in you, you're a hero Naruto, welcome home." All these shouts of praises burned into his memory. All the faces that once scorned or ignored him, now filled with happiness and excitement at the thought of him returning safe and sound. See, children being taught to run away from him, they now cheered his return. "They've all been waiting for your return," Kakashi said, looking at Naruto's facial expressions with worry. Naruto was now facing his dream. Most people don't know how to react, some react negatively. Kakashi's thoughts travel back to the first time he told him his goals. "My dream," Naruto paused with a look on his face that made Kakashi regret asking, "is to be greater than the Hokage," he shouted to the skies. "I'll make everyone in the village acknowledge my existence." Naruto's look on his face showed disbelief, as if this was one big cruel joke. He couldn't believe that he could be loved by the people of his village. Years of silent torment and disregard for his life. Kakashi led Naruto down while watching him closely. "I told them everything," said the smaller version of the boss summons Katsuyu, surprising Naruto that he didn't notice the small summons on his shoulder. "Naruto." Kakashi paused as he watched the crowds of Konoha run to their new hero. "You've done good," Kakashi said as he patted him on the back briefly, then moved to the side as countless shinobi and citizens surrounded him, hugging and patting him on the back, praising him, and all in a very passionate sense. "Are you hurt? What was he like?" Naruto was still hesitant to all the attention he was receiving. Never before, ever did his actions receive credit. When he stopped Gaara, who was there to thank him? When he returned Tsunade, nothing. When he fought and struggled against the forces of Akatsuki, there was no recognition in his achievements. Naruto found himself at one point doubting that his achievements will ever be heard, that all his efforts would be just pushed away into a category of the demon. But of course his failures, his mistakes, his undercomings, they were the news that always reached to the gossips of the village. When he failed in returning Sasuke, he could literally feel the hate being aimed at him. The name-calling increased and somehow worsened. It was as if he pushed the Uchiha away. He was the scapegoat to the deaths during Kyuubi Rampage, and now he was again being unrightfully blamed for the defection of the damn Uchiha. The time Asuma died, killed by Akatsuki member Hidan, Naruto never hated himself as much as he did then. He considered just ending it all. He wasn't a precious person. But he knew him, and he knew this much. He had a fiancé, he had a child, he had a family, he was loved, and because of him, he died, a cold bloody death. They told him they didn't blame him. They told him it wasn't his fault, but Naruto could see in their eyes the look of what if Naruto didn't even exist? Kurenai wouldn't even look him in the eye. Ino still hasn't talked to him yet. No matter how hard he tried to amend things between them. Shikamaru was smart, he didn't blame it on him. Naruto could see it, he knew of the fox, he knew it wasn't his fault. Whether it was his fault or not, it didn't stop the gossip. Those hateful words spread around, only tarnishing his reputation further. But now, his dream of being loved by the people of his village, he was finally being acknowledged. He was now getting the recognition he finally earned for all the years, and yet it seemed foreign to him. The feeling of love surrounding him, the aura of caring, was suffocating. He smiled a small smile. Zetsu Venus flytrap body slowly emerged from the large tree branch, the look of surprise on one face and anger on the other. I never thought pain could be defeated, the white-headed side said. We better tell Toby, let's go, the other side said as the body slowly inked itself and vanished inside the branches. Shikaku Nara watched with a small smile, seeing the Uzumaki boy being praised and hugged. It wasn't hard to know that his life ambition was to be Hokage, and for the recognition of the village, he regularly shouted it across the village when he was younger. Thankfully he had matured faster than he had expected. Shikaku took this small time to see the differences in the young blonde. He was only 16, yet he saw that he was growing into his father's look. It didn't really take a genius to see who Naruto resembles. He was a close friend with Inoichi and his family, and they were well known for their unique hair color. Blonde was very rare in the Sei parts, and the Yamanaka clan were the only blondes in all of the Land of Fire. So Shikaku spoke this over with the third. And what do you know? Nara intelligence brings him to a, how would you say, troublesome S-ranked secret. He was getting very powerful if he defeated a man that not only the 5th and several Anbu platoons couldn't overcome, or even Jiraiya of the Sannin. He defeated the current Kazekage when he was even younger. He has killed Akatsuki members. He truly was the strongest of his generation, maybe even more so than the former generations as well. He felt a spike of chakra behind him and saw a masked Anbu appear. What is it? He said in an annoyed tone. Emergency meeting, he said quickly, while Shikaku groaned inwardly. You're to report to the council room immediately, he spoke quickly and firmly. Shikaku sighed. Already? He said, not really prepared, mentally or emotionally. He hasn't even seen his wife yet. He would be worried for his son, but he was a trained and talented shinobi. He would be fine. No matter how long it took for him, the thought of Naruto's progress remained with him throughout the day and through the council meeting. She used Katsuyu to protect the village, Sakura said, pausing, trying her best to hold in the pent-in feelings. And she's been unconscious ever since, she said with worry. I don't know when she will wake up, Sakura finished off, staring at her sensei with emotion. Tsunade, Naruto said, looking at her with concern. Sakura looked up at Naruto. Already he could see that he was blaming himself for Tsunade's condition. Sakura needed to talk to him about this soon. The council meeting was just as boring as he suspected. The room was entirely empty apart from the large stone table and the 5 large chairs on both sides, and a large wooden chair with the Fire Lord's symbol on it. On one side was the 5 Fire Lord advisors and consultants. In front of them was several papers presented earlier on the damages and costs of the ad were the representations of Konoha, the conservative advisors Kaharu Uditane and Homura Mitokado, the 2 former teammates of Hiruzen Sarutobi, Shikaku the Jonin commander, and Danzo the head of the Foundation or Root Corps. And Anbu captain, only known to everyone in the room except for Danzo as Yamato. At the head of the table was the Fire Daimyo. He was a man around his late 40s, he had an aged and pampered look about his face. His suit was full of ceremonial instruments and his skin was pale and sagging. His face was covered with exotic makeup and his scent was strong with expensive perfumes. He was a man that was hard to respect for a ninja, who was forced to embrace a Spartan-like living. As Shikaku noticed the tension in the room rise, he brought himself out of his musings to properly listening to the conversation. We plan to continue working with the other countries against the threat posed by Akatsuki, Homura stated to the Fire Lord consultant. The Fire Lord advisor spoke up. They were all dressed in the same black uniform with the top hat and fire insignia, but all of them looked very different to the other. The young man with glasses spoke with concern. After what happened to the village, he paused, looking around at the daimyo. The Land of Fire will put every effort into getting it rebuilt. But first we'll have to come up with a budget, he said, carrying off while looking at the papers below him, looking at the prices and such. And consider the strain on the other countries, he said with a sigh, seeing the workload ahead of him. Danzo really couldn't see or any less about budget woes right now. His priorities were set and he was ready to pounce on his goals. There's something else we should consider first, he said while looking downwards with an evil smirk. Shikaku looked at Danzo with suspicion. He never trusted the old war hawk. Who will be the next Hokage? He said in a respectful voice. So it has come to that. Shikaku's mind started seeing the plan that Danzo was pulling. Can we not wait until Tsunade has recovered? The Fire Daimyo said with curiosity. He was always a fan of Tsunade's reign. She was kind and fair in her judging, in the economy, and ninja population has been slowly picking up since the invasion. My lord, Koharu said, addressing the daimyo. Tsunade is still in a coma. We can't decide on a plan for the village when we don't know when she will wake up, she explained to the daimyo. Besides, she is partially responsible for Konoha's destruction, said Koharu with no disbelief in what she said. I'd thought to choose Jiraiya, the daimyo said aloud to himself. I liked him, but he's gone now, he said, thinking about his favorite author, in his opinion the best author of all time. So who will it be? The daimyo asked, curious to their suggestion. Danzo smiled at the sights of a plan going off without a hitch. Well, Shikaku saw the smirk in his mind said of to stopping him. I nominate Hatake Kakashi, he said a bit louder than he intended. Danzo eyed the Nara, inside he was cursing loudly, bloody Naras. Oh ho, son of the White Fang, he thought of all the times he had met the man, he was powerful, respectful, well known. He saw no problem with it. Yes, why not? What do you all think? He asked his advisors. He's well known, powerful and respected, it's true. But don't you think he is a bit too young? Minato was even younger. Quote, who was his teacher? One of the advisors asked. The fourth Hokage, Homura answered immediately, finding the man not that bad of a choice. The daimyo chuckled, thinking of the connections. The fourth Hokage was Jiraiya's pupil and Jiraiya was the pupil of the third Hokage. He chuckled again. There's no problem then, he said, trying to carry on to other business. Danzo stood and smacked his cane downwards in anger. The third's teachings, he said as he stared directly at the daimyo, have as good as destroyed this village. The daimyo looked shocked at the revelation. The Fire Lord's advisors looked upset at the disrespect he was showing, but surprisingly Koharu and Homura seemed interested in what he was saying. Akatsuki leader, who destroyed the village, was once Jiraiya's pupil, he said while looking at everyone present. A satisfied smirk emerged from his face, at seeing the silent Nara. This is the result of sympathizing with their countries and giving them power, he said off the bat. He really didn't plan to say this, but seeing the favor lean towards the son of the White Fang, he had enough. That sort of thinking is weak, he shouted. This weakness led to San's betrayal and allowed Orochimaru's plan to destroy Konoha. He felt that the daimyo was slowly understanding his side. It led to the formation of Akatsuki, he said, pausing after hearing the daimyo gasp. And to Sasuke, the last remaining Uchiha, leaving Konoha for his own secret purposes. He continued his rant to the silent council. What kind of Hokage do we need now? He asked the rhetorical question as his voice grew louder and louder. One who can put an end to this wretched situation, who can bring change to the ninja world and reinforce the law. That governess. He paused, looking around. He slammed his able hand down on the desk. That man is me, he finished as he stared directly at the daimyo looking for answers. The room was silent, no on. He moved as the Fire Lord pondered over what Danzo said. He turned to his advisors. They all conversed between themselves, discussing the consequences and advantages if they chose Danzo. One advisor decided to speak for their decision. Maybe we should let Danzo take care of things, my lord, he said with a frown, obviously against the thought of Danzo being in charge. The Fire Lord pondered and felt that if his advisors approved, then he has no problem with the idea. He was a proven leader and it was only temporary. The Nara spoke. We can't let his fanaticism. All right, it is decided. In the mind Nara Shikaku, he felt the cogs of his mind push and pull. If Kakashi was found unacceptable because of his teachings, then whom? A person who was respected and powerful, a person loved by the people and the ninja populace. His mind traveled to Naruto. He was far more powerful than Kakashi and he was well respected. He had the credentials, but he was too young. At best he will serve as a distractio. And for the Nara to come up with some other more qualified shinobi. I nominate Uzumaki Naruto. Unlike last time when he nominated Kakashi, it was taken as a serious notion. After nominating Naruto, he as half sure that most of the people currently here would have laughed if it wasn't for this serious demeanor that he was left with after that very passionate speech from Danzo. A chuckle escaped Homura. Please Nara, explain to us how Naruto would be a better candidate than Danzo here, he said as he gestured to the old war hawk who was surprisingly quiet after he blurted out Naruto's name. After 2 days no one would dare speak against the wits of the Nara clan. Shikaku slowly took a deep breath in and exhaled as he readied himself for a lengthy argument that might run on for some time. Uzumaki Naruto, the sixth Hokage, he thought as the idea seemed more and more appealing as his mind. Well Shikaku, now that you are done, why don't we? Excuse me Homura, The Fire Lord cut in as he had a puzzled look about his face. I would like to hear him out. I have heard quite a bit of this Naruto character since I have arrived. He paused as he took the name under consideration, his pause caused for tea. He too advisors to take this as a serious threat to their influence and power in their village. Fire Lord, I protest, he is far too young. Homura spoke, trying his best to take this nomination and ruin it as best as he could. The Fire Daimyo, intrigued look about his face, never left. Ah, true advisor, but I feel that we are entering a new age where age and power are being less and less related. The Fire Lord spoke in his politically experienced voice. Look at Itachi, Anbu captain at only. At first memory, 12, 13, he said, unsure at the age ended with him. He cracked under the pressure of all the responsibilities, and why? Danzo stood angered at the daimyo foolishness. He was too immature emotionally. He was overwhelmed by the responsibilities of an Anbu captain and he acted it out. He had a limited amount of outlets and the loss of his close friend seemed to be the pushing point, Danzo pointed out. And now you are considering giving another young man, even more responsibilities than that of an Anbu captain. Ask me, how would that end? In disaster, in chaos, he shouted, but the Fire Lord didn't seem fazed. Besides, he isn't as mature or emotionally prepared as the Uchiha prodigy. Please listen to reason, he is a mere genin, Koharu said, backing up the claims of Danzo. Not to mention he graduated last in his class, Homura pointed out. A genin to Kage, it's you. Unheard of, Koharu shouted as loud as you could without being disrespectful. In Wind Country, their village Kage was previously a chunin, now he is one of the more powerful and successful Kages of their small history. He looked at the other members of the meeting and sighed at seeing no progress. So true, you three are in your claims. Maybe he isn't prepared, but shouldn't that be assessed by his maturity and not that of others at the same age, he explained. The Fire Lord chuckled. After all this arguing we haven't even heard Shikaku's reasoning. He chuckled again. Shikaku, he said, staring at him directly with respect. While Shikaku just sighed, somehow everyone else did the arguing, he just initiated the controversy. Fire Lord, he said, addressing the daimyo, I was told that you are permitted to hear S-ranked secrets, he said while holding his hands to his chin. He could see everyone around him was pondering over what he would reveal. Yes, Nara, I am permitted, unfortunately my advisors are not, he said as he gestured for them leave. The five left, all in a military-like manner, but some grumbling could be heard. Continue, he said as Shikaku stood, all in a respectful manner. Naruto Uzumaki is a genin true, but, he said as he looked at the advisors, what Homura and Koharu forgot to mention is that he was on the verge of graduating on his rookie year alone, he said in his aloof voice that could be considered a Nara accent. He graduated last of his class true, but in the Chunin exams he defeated the now special Jonin and Hyuga genius and the current Case Gaara Durin. The invasion, he said, pausing for the Fire Lord to take all this in. We also looked over the plans of Orochimaru. Apparently Gaara was there, trump card if you will, in Naruto single-handedly defeated him, he said, hoping to prove some sort of connection. He faced Orochimaru and Kabuto, a very skilled high Jonin, and defeated him with a technique that was ranked high A. He also, just recently defeated the one man who destroyed this great village with a one jutsu, a man who not even Jiraiya or Tsunade could defeat, a man who led a terrorist group of the most powerful nuke nins ever. And, most importantly, he shows compassion and caring for every living person, he said with a nod. A ninja that shows mercy, who could follow a man that wouldn't kill for his country, Danzo said with a chuckle. The Fire Lord spoke up, that is true, a shinobi that opposes killing, if they live how do we know we are not simply stopping someone who would try and kill me or you in the future, the Fire Lord explained. Shikaku say the reason in this, but the years with his child, had shown him Naruto's finer points. My son Shikamaru, said he felt death and evil when he was around the younger, current Case Gaara. He said he felt he would kill him if he just said the wrong word, he paused. Naruto had the chance to kill him, he was near death's door and Naruto let him live, now because of Naruto's intervention he is living a happy and successful life, because of him our relations with Suna have never been stronger. Pain, the leader of Akatsuki, I was told he didn't kill him, he gave him a NCE at life, and guess what happened next, Shikaku said, as he felt the bingo books raise his reward for his death right now. Nagato returned all the people he had killed, and if it wasn't for the kin The heart of Naruto's we would be busy digging graves rather than rebuilding our village, he said with a sad smile. Naruto has made relations better with many of the smaller villages, bird, wave, snow, waterfall. I could go on but my point being made is that he gives Konoha friends and allies. Even if I remember correctly he has had several contacts from other countries willing to have political marriages involving only Naruto, Shikaku said with a perverted grin. Apparently he has left a certain impression on the young women of our allies. Shikaku felt not only everyone, apart from Danzo, but himself find Naruto a more appealing leader than Danzo. Just outside, right now the people are cheering and praising him for what he has done, he said as he felt like he was doing something oh so right. He has the respect of the people and shinobi, he said with a smile knowing full well ever since the Chunin exams, Jonin have found the boy less of a nuisance, unlike some other candidates, he's not even trying to ignore the glare that was directed to him. He was trained by Kakashi for his genin team, Shikaku said with a bored look, he is the apprentice of Jiraiya, he said again, he led hard as he readied himself for some consequences to his actions, and as long as the S-rank law stands, he is not the child of Minato Namikaze, he said as the room went quiet. But the room erupted into shouts of protest and ramblings. The Fire Lord raised his hand as the remaining council members slowly grew quiet. He has the heritage, he said as he thought about the strength and power of the fourth. He has the power, he said as he knew of his adventures, facing Gaara, Neji, Orochimaru and Kabuto at a very young age and now the Akatsuki leader. He has the respect of the villagers and the shinobi of Konoha, he said as he watched the far window seeing the masses cheer for him so loudly. He had never seen them celebrate so happily even during the fourth Hokage's introduction party. Danzo saw the look in his eyes. He saw that Shikaku was convincing this idiotic daimyo. He stood with no care of respect, he has been taught the same teachings that have made the village how it is today, he said pointing out at the damages. The teachings of the first was taught and embraced by the second, he in turn taught it to the third, said Shikaku. The third taught Jiraiya and Tsunade the fifth, each of them embraced the teachings. Jiraiya taught not just the fourth but his son as well, Shikaku explained as he watched the Fire Lord nod his head knowing the connections. Danzo presents Ange, Shikaku said glaring at the War Hawk, he says that these teachings have destroyed Konoha, he paused, seeing he had the daimyo full attention. But these teachings, these acts of compassion, the will of fire, all of these values that we hold close, are what we are, to embrace Danzo's changes of war and death, over peace and compassion for others, he simply shook his head. Naruto is currently the only. He thought for a second as he had always boy, but hearing what he has said, it shows him in this new light, he was no boy, he was, man, who will continue these teachings have made us survive against 3 great shinobi wars, against odds greater than any we could comprehend, against invasion after invasion, whether it is Sound or Akatsuki we have survived and foe. To become the greatest village, Shikaku said, he could imagine a huge nap after this. Naruto Uzumaki has earned this title more than anyone of us, let alone this old war hawk, Shikaku said pointing disrespectfully at Danzo. The Fire Lord raised his hand, Shikaku breathed in deeply as the daimyo rose from his seat. You have proven your case Shikaku, he said with a semi-smile. Bu-san, how do you feel taking orders from Naruto? He asked politely. He always hated those masked fellows, very creepy vibe, just no will you at a moment's notice, sure the Jonin could do so just as easily but the look they had about them didn't scream it out as much as a Jonin jacket. I have previously worked with Naruto through several missions as his commander, he said as he coughed slightly, Ousing for effect, Naruto is an individual, is clumsy, loud, unorthodox, he acts before thinking, he's brash, straight to the point and stubborn, Danzo smiled at the man. I would have to say if Tsunade was here, she too would recommend Naruto for the position as the 6th Hokage, he said as Danzo for the 20th time stood up in anger. I protest, I have had enough of this disrespect, Ill sit when you address me Danzo, the daimyo said with a newfound emotion of annoyance spoken through his voice. He stood for a second and crumbled down glaring daggers at the Nara and Anbu. Anbu, continue, the Anbu captain continued, I speak for myself obviously, and not Tsunade but in my small time in knowing Naruto, he said as he cleared his voice. I would risk my life for his, and I know exactly he would do the same. If not more, for me or any man, woman or child of Konoha, he stared directly at the daimyo. To me, sir, nothing makes him more fit to be a Hokage, he shows, he said as he chuckled slightly, remembering the first time he met him. The will of fire, it was silent. I have heard enough, the Fire Lord spoke. He rose from his seat, closing his fan. So it is decided. Danzo closed his eyes, seeing his dreams taken away from him because of some Nara and Anbu. I, the Fire Lord, appoint Naruto Uzumaki as the Rokudaime Hokage, he said clearly. After the small expected announcement, neither of the advisors spoke out, whether they found Naruto fit for the position, nor did they have nothing to say at this point. The daimyo clapped his hands together and a messenger boy appeared through the only entry door. Yes, sire, said the small sickly-looking boy, covered in light clothing and bare dirty feet. Send Uzumaki Naruto to us, he said with a smile. Quote, yes, sire, he answered and moved with surprising speeds. Danzo just grinded his teeth and made a signal. A root solider came and whispered some nonsense in his ear. A frown worn across his face. Or what was shown of it? I have some urgent matters to attend to. My underling will handle any business in my absence, he said in voice that showed his displeasure. The root member sat in the chair as the advisors walked slowly back in. Danzo eyed Shikaku before leaving. He just returned it with a loud yawn as he rolled his shoulders. Bloody Nara, was the last thing the council heard before the poof of smoke closed around his body. Sore loser. What? The confused blonde asked. We of the council have appointed you, Uzumaki Naruto, the Rokudaime Hokage, he repeated, his arms raised and his chin high and mighty. Naruto looked shocked. No, he was more than shocked. He shook his head, his knees were shaking, he needed a seat. He started, this was all too soon, first the villagers, now this. His dreams were being thrust at him far too soon. He looked around and found a spare chair. He rushed forwards and grabbed the seat and leaned back against the back and sighed as his knees nearly gave in. Do you accept? The daimyo asked, certainly pleased with the man so far, that is until his reaction to the news, which was, to the daimyo, a bit of character. He was everything he thought a leader should be. Before he announced his promotion, he showed a true confidence in himself. He seemed a bit shook up with the newfound love from the villagers, but it was all understandable for a former village pariah. He was far from gay. The orange book in his side pocket defiantly proved it, but he instantly noticed the handsome looks of the young blonde. Not that it mattered to him, it was just a matter of politics. It is a very important, if shallow, trait that have proceeded in the short time of politics. A cage is the face of their village. The better looking the face, the more appealing the village looks to an outside business owner. It's shallow, but it's human nature. The Fire Lord knew he was strong. That powerful aura that followed him as he entered the room just made his belief in this boy intensify. He looked at the boy worriedly. He really was beginning to see the upsides of this boy. If he refused, he might be forced into a corner with the issue and appoint the now less appealing Danzo. Well, he continued as the boy was still in shock, it was too soon. What about Sasuke? What about Tsunade? What about his promise? Why me? He managed to say, still in hard shock. The Fire Lord smiled kindly. He was young. We all wondered at first ourselves. He laughed a hearty laugh, but fortunately Shikaku here, he said, pointing at the scarred Nara, who saluted at the eventual leader. He nominated you, and well, that led to a very passionate response from Danzo, he said with a smile. He saw that Naruto still was unconvinced. He sighed in frustration. Please, Naruto, stay seated and hear us out, he said as he gestured to the opposite seat to the daimyos. Naruto willingly sat down, feeling the weight of future responsibilities pulling him down. The daimyo pulled his fan out once more. He looked at the council and then Naruto. Please, Naruto, explain to me, why not you, he said, waving the fan lightly. I'm too young, he said silently. A part of him knew he wasn't ready. Another not wanting him to lose an opportunity at his lifetime goal. How old are you? The daimyo asked. 16, turning 17 in 2 months, sir. The cage, a personal friend of yours, I've been told, is also 16 and has been in office for several months, so I see age is no problem for Suna, then it is no problem for Konoha, he said with the familiar smile. I haven't even led a team. How could I even lead an entire village? Naruto asked, convinced that age couldn't be used as an excuse with these people. What proof does a man need to know how he can or can't lead? Does he need an array of battle scars or a record of battles and wars won? does he need a shiny medal for a single act of good luck? He paused slightly. A leader to me needs to care for his fellow man, he needs to know sacrifice and loss, to me everything else will follow. He saw the resolve slowly leave the boy. I just don't know, it's too much. What if I mess up? Naruto said, never truly understanding the ramifications of being a leader in Kage until now. You are a strong young shinobi, you have defeated countless enemies. Against amazing odds, you have more than what it takes to protect the weak and respected enough to lead your troops without their hesitation. He paused. You have the heritage of legends and the upbringings of a modest man that believes in loyalty and honor, he said, making the blonde scratch his head in embarrassment. Your case of complete loyalty to this village and its Elbing has been rewarded, he said, patting his shoulder. First he pointed at a familiar Anbu. You have the support of the Anbu captain and his troops, then he pointed at Shikaku. You have the support of the Jonin commander, then he pointed at the two elderly advisors and shook his head in a, never mind them, motion, then he stepped back, gesturing to himself. You have the support and money of one of the richest men in the lands, he said very modestly. He brought Naruto towards the large stone ledge. Naruto, who still was only beginning to understand, was moved towards the ledge. He looked at the village below. He could see the small villagers working together, helping one another, rebuilding their lives once again. It pained his heart that he could have stopped all this destruction. Most importantly, you have the support of the people, he said in reserved voice. The people are who you protect, who you lead. He placed his hand on Naruto's shoulder. These people need your protection. They need you to lead. He turned him towards the daimyo. Will you lead your village? Will you become the Rokudaime Hokage? The daimyo asked. Naruto paused. He felt confused as of why he was even considering going against his dream, his lifetime goal. What kept him going at long trainings? What kept him alive during those difficult times? What convinced him never to act out or fight back against the villagers? Hateful ways. Suddenly he answered, without his mind even acknowledging. His voice spoke without his realization, until he finished. I accept the position, Daimyo-sama, Naruto said with a newly found smile. Thank you, Hokage-sama, your position will be announced in 2 days, he replied, happy with the results of his pushy attitude. Can I just ask one thing, sir? He said, feeling an issue needed to be attended to after all these events. Sure, what is? He asked. Naruto entered the Hokage's office. His office, just saying that seemed strange and unusual. He looked at the large chair and desk. He was surprised seeing the dark oak and ceremonial designs carved into the desk that were usually covered with loose business paperwork. He sat on the worn chair. ND instantly heard a knock to the door. Come in, he said, not sure of how to welcome someone. Shizune entered and walked towards him. So how are you feeling? She said softly. Overwhelmed, he said simply. He looked around the room. 6 framed paintings, each of the Hokages in some sort of dramatic pose, and a single painting of the village. There was 2 spare seats and a couch in the corner, a large lamp in the other corner. He looked closer at each painting. The first Hokage had his arms crossed with a scary look about his face, and trees emerging from the ground upwards. The second Hokage held his hands together in a kai form with water rushing around in a dramatic fashion, and the ocean and sunset in the background. The third Hokage held his staff bow in one hand and a kunai in the other, wind blasting to one direction. The fourth had the Rasengan held in his hand, his legendary 3-pronged kunai in the other, with his yellow flash following his body, and his feet were planted on a red bumpy surface that was most likely the boss summons of the toads. And how is the old lady? He asked softly. He said as he looked at the 5th's picture, Tsunade missing her green jacket, wielding 2 chakra scalpels. He smiled at the look of seriousness about her face. He wondered what his painting would look like. Unfortunately, she hasn't gotten any better, only time will tell. Now, she said, staring outside the room's single window. Shizune caught his attention. Well, right now you will just have to deal. Unfortunately, she sighed at the difficult times ahead. You have an important meeting with a team from Kumo in half an hour, so be on your best behavior. Naruto just huffed and nodded. Shizune backed away before remembering something. Hokage-sama, I almost forgot. Shish. He said as she left the office for a second and brought out the Hokage's hat and robe. You need to wear this in the presence of foreign nins, she said as she threw the clothing to him. Naruto just the clothing effortlessly and looked at it suspiciously. Don't worry, it's new clothes, not used by any of the other Hokages, she said with a sweat drop. She closed the door as she left and left Naruto to his business. He sighed as he put the Hokage hat on and then the robes. He felt the orange jacket and Hokage robes cling together uncomfortably. He sighed, took off both and replaced the orange jacket with the Hokage robe. He didn't button it, he really didn't feel like doing too much with the suit. He still had his black muscle shirt underneath and his necklace that he treasured greatly, even more so now. He looked in the mirror and didn't think he looked too bad, not bad at all. The hat pushed his headband down so he wrapped it around his right bicep, letting his hair down. He looked at the desk and saw the closed compartments. He opened the first three, full with empty sake bottles of course. The fourth held several files, each under the different hidden village and secret folder. On the few S-rank missions that had classified written all over it. Naruto was curious and went through a few. The first one he grabbed, Suna. It was fairly loaded with papers filled with their Obi information and economic reviews in Alliance papers. He looked closer at the Alliance papers, just out of mere curiosity, and saw a letter written out by Gaara, with the heading, Political Marriage. His eyes squinted at the prospect of a political marriage, a person being forced to breed with another, sometimes without the other's consent, a life decision to be forced to love a stranger or den. Why and live a life of exclusion and political hate? Naruto really hated the idea of forced love. He lived a life of lonely nights, the thought that he or anybody would be used in some sort of political cementation of alliances. He wondered and thought that if he could make a law against political marriages, he smiled as he now had the power to overrule and make laws for the better of his village. The prospect excited him. He was a little curious of who was being offered on both sides, but before he could read it, Shizune entered with a huff. Shizune entered with a bow. Naruto sneered at this. Kakashi is here, she said. Ah. Let him in, he said with uncertain voice, one that didn't know how the process went. Kakashi entered in his aloof manner, with Shizune following in tow, his orange book held out and his single eye reading the lines, as Shizune placed a pile of paperwork on his desk. Naruto was sure Kakashi saw him earlier, or heard something before, because with the Hokage robes and the being in the Hokage office. It doesn't take a genius to figure this out. So what's new? Kakashi asked, again in his nonchalant voice. Naruto just sighed and rubbed his temples. He threw a scroll to him and Kakashi grabbed it without looking up. This is a very important mission that Shizune has set up in the absence of the Hokage, he said, gesturing to the woman at his side. I need you to request some supplies and builders from Suna, he said. Grab 10 or so Chunins and escort them back, he commanded. Kakashi saluted and left in a puff of smoke. Naruto turned to Shizune, and I need you to keep Guy and Lee far away from the foreign builders, he said in a serious tone. They are close friends and all, but I feel nightmares about them will affect productivity, he said as Shizune nodded and looked for the duo. The team from Kumo is here, Hokage-sama, she said, using the new honorific, which he knew he would never get used to. Send them in, Naruto said as he adjusted his hat, reading himself for his first official meeting. What a day, Naruto repeated as he thought about this extremely long day. He gave a heavy sigh to the air as his mind went numb with all the thoughts. Naruto walked slowly to his temporary housing unit. Originally he was offered a large wooden cabin home, with furnishings and luxury-level food, but Naruto gave his home to a large family of 12. Seeing their thankful looks was a good enough replacement, even if he had to give up that ramen-filled cupboard he had his eye on the entire time. Every single flavor, he shook his head of images of that delicious flavor packed, every single flavor. People looked at Naruto strangely as they witnessed him slap his self-silly while he walked into his small industrial tent, made of a single sheet of whatever tents were made of, covering the entire top and sides. He looked around feeling the mixed emotions suddenly lean upon him. He had one hell of a day to say at least. He tried to desperately find a distraction to his rising worries. He figured if he looked around a bit his mind would wander from the upcoming events. He looked around his room and had to admit, it was already better looking than his former apartment. Sure, there was no bathroom, there was a public bathroom open to all, with toilets and showers and such, but Naruto usually avoided it at all cost. He had a message burned into his mind whenever he saw that crummy place. Emin have a kitchen, he shared a campfire with his fellow villagers and a cook was assigned to every 50 or so civilians. He was just lucky enough to be assigned with his favorite chief. Being Hokage had nothing to do with it, honest, Also he did have a small box underneath his mattress, that contained all the ramen that he could find within the ruins. He had cuts all over his hands at the end but whenever he cooked a fresh brew and shared it with the children of neighboring tents, he always found himself saying, it was worth it. All in his lonesome tent was a mattress to the right that covered a good portion of the available space, a mahogany desk and matching bookcase filled with all the instructions and political history of his village and the other village, and a large maroon-colored rug with golden-colored toads imprinted into the rug. There was also his summoning scroll leaning to the side, now Natu. Rally he was originally concerned about just leaving it there, but seeing he trusted the Anbu that was assigned to the tent, he was fine with leaving it there. He would bring it with him on any long-distance mission or something. Just to be safe though, he laid down on his dark maroon quilt and dirty white mattress and pillow. His mind was thinking about all the events that unfolded today, while his instincts were on high alert for another reason. Ever since the village accepted Naruto, he's never been happier, truly, but in some cases, certain females were a bit too acceptant. Women have been following his every movements. He was being tracked like a nuke nin on enemy territory. He knows he would have been jumped by now if it wasn't for the Anbu nins outside. And he had to assign the very powerful Anbu to say the least. Believe it or not, Naruto knew this was going to happen. It wasn't arrogance or anything, nothing like that at all, but during his travels with the pervert, he stopped at many villages and cities. And he was constantly surrounded by groups of giggling girls, pointing at him, with blushes on their faces and a look of lust and admiration in their eyes. He ever read if this is what Sasuke ever went through with his fan club. With how annoying it is, he wondered if that was the pushing point. Naruto's mind went to a very logical place at the moment and thought that having beautiful women constantly throwing themselves at him, it's not a really bad thing to live with, is all Naruto was thinking. Better them than going to an accused child molester. Orochimaru or beautiful woman, Orochimaru or beautiful woman, sigh, what a hard choice, Naruto said as he chuckled to himself. Anyway, it went unnoticed by him of course, but Jiraiya eventually pointed it out with a jealous look about his face. Naruto had to admit, it helped his confidence at an important time in his life, what with his problems with Sasuke and his broken promise to Sakura. His feelings going ignored by the one he truly felt like he loved at the time, and then he finds out that if it ever came to a point where he could never have Sakura, and there has been so many times, there might be some sliver of hope that he could be with another. He just wanted to hear someone, hell anyone, utter the small, but oh so significant sentence, I love you. His mind went white for a second, his body froze. A sharp pain flashed through his head. His head ached at the thought. His mind was rushing as images of the fated battle between him and one of the pains rushed and raced through his mind. An outline of someone he just couldn't make out appeared. He tried desperately to remember this individual, but the image faded into the shadows of his mind. He felt relieved and relaxed after a while. He chuckled sadly to his lonely self. The mere thought of someone uttering, I love you, made his body react negatively. His chuckle slowly faded as his mind began to wonder if he could ever accept a person saying that to him. Now granted, ever since he saved the village, hearing, I love you, from random strangers was very common to him right now, but it wasn't exactly the sentence, yet the look in the eye, the closeness of him and her, how he could slowly grab the person and give them a wholehearted smile and hug. Thinking about love, it sounded so unrealistic to him. Not that he didn't believe in romantic love, he has seen it with his own eyes, whether it be between a man and woman, or same sex, it really didn't matter to him, love was love. But the thought of him with another, that he believed, truly loved him, not for his political position or how high he is ranked, or even how good looking he is, just someone that accepted him, and that means L of him, and that shamefully includes the fox. And in his mind, realistically, he just doesn't think a woman or a lover could look past that damn demon fox in his gut. Two women sneezed at the same time, one in Suna and another somewhere I just couldn't make out at the moment. He sighed as he looked around. His sight traveled to another corner in his tent, seeing a pile of gifts, in the other corner from several of the ninja clans. But mostly from merchant and land-rich families, looking to get on the better side of the leader of their village. Naruto just looked at it with a frown. He remembered most of those family names. They were usually the worst, not just ignoring, but making fun of his existence, pointing and spreading rumors, calling him names, everything, and now that he was the commander-in-chief, they were trying to win back some favor. Simply disgusting. He went to his feet with a grunt. and made his way to the tent exit. He opened the loose fabric and took in a sight that he truly loved. Naruto could see the hills and rivers, covered with various different colored trees and raging rivers in the distance, but what really made the view was the several tents surrounding a single large campfire. With villagers helping one another, buildings being erected in the distance and the elderly and young, talking with that special language that was held between grandchildren and grandparents. Naruto sat on a small wooden chair that he placed next to his tent, just for this beautiful sight. As Naruto breathed in a deep breath of fresh air, he couldn't help but notice the change in his demeanor. He felt more reserved during times where he would have blown up and learned when to embrace quiet times like this. Although with all the improvements to his personality he was constantly stressed at the same time. The stress and pressures the position held were far from Naruto's young imagination. His father, the third, Granny Tsunade, and he was sure the first and second Hokage were all plagued by the curse of paperwork, and they regularly announced their displeasure to whomever cared to listen. Originally Naruto felt that they were just lazy and were overreacting to the large amounts of paperwork. But after experiencing just several days of 8-hour shifts, granted with all the destruction and chaos he may get a few more than average, but he was already starting to feel the stress after just a few days is a bit concerning. And without the thrill of a possible S-rank mission looming, and combine that with the knowledge that you can't leave and that the most powerful ninja within the village is being used as a simple political figure, signing papers and kissing babies, where he could be out training, becoming stronger to protect his village. He sighed. It was a flawed system. Naruto pulled his Konoha headband off and placed it on his lap as he stared at the symbol of the Leaf Village. As he stared he couldn't help but feel his ambition disappear. He felt that his sole goal in life was to become accepted by the people of the village, and with his achievement in hand, and his Hokage position being handed or forced, some would say to him, Naruto would wonder what a young 6-year-old Naruto would have done in his situation, most likely embrace it and berate him for being how he was being. Sigh. And the position of Hokage was, to Naruto, a position that demanded acceptance, respect, and as a child, he wanted the most and would do anything for it, whether it was stealing the Hokage's scroll in the middle of the night, whether it was a high UGA genius saying he could never achieve his goals, and that life was destiny's bitch. All the blockades that stood between him and his current position as leader of the Leaf Village made him who he is. The most stubborn, knuckle-headed, unpredictable ninja of Konoha, hell of all the shinobi lands. And now seeing himself as a more reserved man, who has no goal, who lost his ambition, lost his fire, well, it made him sad. He thought that once he was handed the Hokage's hat, and as the masses clapped and cheered in the distance, the curtains would close or he would walk into the sunlight, as it happens in all of those great heroic stories. But with this newfound reality pushed upon him, he realized something else is going to be needed from him, whether it be a goal or ambition that seemed out of this world to anyone. Even a Hokage. Naruto continued thinking. With all the available resources, he could do anything. Anything. The thought lingered deep within the depths of his mind. War, peace, economy, education, damn near everything was within his grasp. Anything. He thought of how flawed the Genin team system was. He could change that. His mind traveled to how the clans were allowed special grounds accessed only to them. He could stop that. The improper conduct of the Anbu ops in certain areas and villages, Iwa, Suna, etc., etc. The bribes taken by the gatekeepers to let in illegal aliens and enemy spies in. The easily accessed and undermanned jutsu library. Their lack of genjutsu users and overly favored ninjutsu users. The lack of security in the lower poorer areas and the high amount of security in the rich areas. It could all change, just because of him, all because of him. He could make a difference. He could make the difference of his village prospering into a land of rich, strong and peaceful people, to his village being a mere afterthought in the history pages. The thought excited him. He leapt from his lone chair and made his way to the Hokage's tent, his tent. Things were going to change, a lot of things. Naruto currently was on his work chair shirtless and sweaty with all the excitement of his newfound power and influence. Naruto put his writing hand down, read in overuse as he finished a letter to his best friend the Case. Naruto smiled as he folded the letter and stamped the seal of the Hokage on it. Naruto's smirk never left as he looked at the letter. He still hasn't told Gaara about his promotion. He wanted to surprise his best friend. He was sure he would be happy for him. Naruto really looked forward to this. Shizune, he called for his recently assigned assistant. Yes, Hokage-sama, she said, her face a little flushed at the sight of a shirtless Hokage. I need you get this to the cage as soon as possible, he said with a smile, seeing the red-faced Shizune. Is it time? Naruto said with a serious voice. In 10 minutes, the ceremony will begin and you will begin your announcement to the village, Shizune said with a lustful eye. Also I need you to get me Kakashi, he said, grabbing another piece of paper and handing it to his assistant. Shizune's eyes were transfixed on the body of Naruto's. The muscles and rippling biceps, the hardened muscles covering every inch of his stone-sculpted body, small scars in places that seemed to enhance his rugged looks. The small layer of sweat covering his body and the candle in the background seemed to make him look like a god. Shizune, Shizune, Naruto repeated as he waved his hand over her face, trying to get her attention. Ah yes, Hokage-sama, she said, looking shyly away from him as his body was so close to hers. Can you do that for me? Naruto asked innocently to his sister figure. You can do anything to M. I mean yes. Yes, Naruto-kun, I mean Hokage-sama, she said as she left in a hurry to finish her tasks, while a small amount of blood leaking out of her left nostril. But before she could leave, Naruto grabbed her arm. She looked at the sad face of Naruto and wondered what was happening. I'm sorry, he said, hugging her. Shizune closed her eyes as the warmth spread around her. I just want to thank you for stopping me during the Kumo meeting. He paused, things got a bit out of hand. I just want to thank you, he said, still holding her close. Shizune closed her eyes as the warmth seemed to overload her senses. Her mind went numb as he held her close. Thank you. The village hidden in the rocks, show them what you got. Akazuki, Kurozuchi, please take good care of Tsuchikage-sama, one of the elders called out. The shortest and oldest man in all of Iowa and quiet possibly all of the shinobi lands, held his hip in pain as he readied himself mentally for a long and most definitely painful trip. Ah, it's a pain going to a meeting at my age, the man said, leaning against his old trusty staff. You youngsters don't understand what it's like when your hips are virtual time. OMBS, yelled to his followers as he looked out at his lands. The female bodyguard, named Kurozuchi, currently wearing the standard uniform of Iowa Jonin, replied, with netting covering her legs in a CKY look about her face. Why don't retire you then, Gramps? You can't really rely on your former glory forever, she said, laughing at the look her superior gave her. The biggest of the three, a very RGE and hefty man named Akazuki with a smile leaned down while laughing. Ahahaha, I'll take your luggage, Tsuchikage-sama, the big man said with a smile. The old man glared out at the mountain of a man and made a threatening stance which to an average viewer seemed very hilarious. An old man that reached to the bottom of his knees pointing at a man whose forehead reached some clouds was very funny. Don't touch, Akazuki. I don't need your help. The old man then placed the straps securely to his shoulders, glared at his bodyguards. His last thought before lifting was, I'll show M. A loud groin-holding, heart-stopping, hair-raising snap, to the point where Kurozuchi had to flinch at the sound. The Tsuchikage's eyes popped out as his mouth opened to record proportions. It all went white before a sharp flash of pain rushed through his body. It didn't seem that bad until a second passed, then another, and holy sweet Kami, a cage can only go through so much. He has faced bloody limitless enemies. He has gone through hours and hours of torture. Yet these damn hips. Oh, my hips, the old man screaming to the heavens in agony, his body clenched inward. As the unpleasant feeling never left his elderly body, every single muscle screamed at him to put the damn bag down. The only thing keeping him upright was the shock and Iowa pride that he was famous for. Kurozuchi, with a huge smile, laughing at the old man's condition, she looked at the pain-filled man, said, So, what do you say, should you send someone else in your place? The old cage managed to say in the middle of feminine screams, Don't be ridiculous, who do you think I am? He pointed an accusing at his disrespectful bodyguard. He screamed to the clouds, I am the great and fearsome leader of Iwagakure. He looked dead in the eyes of Akazuki. I'll carry my own language, he said, threatening the giant man with his manners and stuff. Kurozuchi sighed and pinched the bridge of her nose, good grief. What a stubborn old man. Akazuki decided against the will of his commander. He then lifted the old man and his luggage and said with a huff, All right, carry your own luggage then, let's go. The old cage wanted to fight back, but the soft fat of Akazuki meshed well with his lower back. He never felt better. He decided, what the hell, and enjoyed the ride. The village hidden in the water. Now take good care of yourself, the head Jonin said as he looked at the Mizukage's bodyguards. The elderly advisor then slowly handed the hat of the Mizukage to the newly assigned wearer, happy to see a old and weary face, full of wisdom and age. The elderly man's hand wavering and shook due to his age, while the others watched with a smile. Don't let anything go wrong, the old man whispered as he leaned in deeply to his ceremonial snake staff. The Mizukage replied, holding the hat on her hand, and said, I swear on my name as Mizukage, that I will fulfill my duty. Oh my village, she said in her elegant and soft voice, a voice that just didn't seem to suit that of killers such as herself. The old man slowly turned and shook less as he then turned to her escorts. Ow. Chojuro, please guard. Mizukage dono, well, I think I'll be fine. Probably, said the boy holding a very large sword the shape of a dried fish on his back, Justin. His glasses as sweat poured down slowly his neck, not being used to all this attention, the elder replied slowly. Have faith in yourself, you are strong, he said with a grandfather-like smile. That why you were chosen to guard me, okay Chojuro. The Mizukage looked down at the nervous boy and smiled. Chojuro blushed like a tomato and nodded with a smile. Chojuro thought with a blush, she's so kind. Yeah, I'll try my best, he said with his blush still predominant on his face. I hope, he finished. All you need to say is, yes ma'am, no on. He wants to hear your waffling, Ao said quite rudely to the younger of the two. A man, you kids these days, just be a man, Ao ranted on, but the Mizukage went blank as those two words seemed to mix. What did he say? A man, need a man. The Mizukage suddenly appeared beside Ao, who was still telling Chojuro off. I'm just giving the kid advice when I was his age. Shut up Ao or I'll kill you. The Mizukage whispered into his ear with enough venom laced in her voice to kill any lesser man. Ao just looked at the Mizukage as if she was crazy. He wasn't going to harsh on the boy, was he? Is that why she threatened him? Why was it she threatened him whenever he talks to Chojuro? Come on Chojuro, she said sweetly. Ao, let's go. She said harshly at the man who thinks it's funny that she needs a man. Oh but how it is true it was seeing the skies above. Would there ever be one for her? Would there ever be a happy ending for a woman in the position of power? If only there was some handsome powerful nin out there that can challenge her. If only. The village hidden in the clouds. Darui, let's go, said the Raikage. Readied himself and jumped through the glass-stained window in a dramatic fashion. Follow me, the impatient Raikage yelled as he expected his bodyguards to follow in suit. The Raikage's secretary held her head as she sighed, not again. Both she and Darui stood up from kneeling and said, let's go Darui, she said, encouraging his fellow Jonin to follow. Nah, I think I'll use the door. I'll catch up with you soon enough, Darui said lazily. She was about to follow until he saw where the Raikage landed. Hey Darui, look, he said, pointed at where he landed. Darui just groaned inwardly as he saw where he landed. Darui handed she a purse of gold coins, who she just pocketed immediately. Wow, pinpoint really, Darui said, although disappointed with the impressed with the landing. Ink he did it on purpose, she said, looking down at the poor man. Nah, no sane man would do that on female Anbu night, Darui said with a sad voice. Female bathhouse is the reason for living for all men. Yet it kills so many, she said in a voice filled with wisdom on the fact. Amen, Darui said. So stairs it is, she said as he couldn't watch the carnage anymore. Yay, I think that's the best to see on right now, Darui said, agreeing with the other Jonin. The village hidden in the sand. The fifth Cage looked away from the desert sun, as his vision traveled to the civilians who loved him to the point of seeing him off on an especially hot desert day, there to see him off. The people he swore to protect, the civilians, the ninja, the children and the elderly he would risk his life for, the people, his life, his precious people. Please take care of yourself, Gara-sama. Temari-san, Kankuro-san, please take good care of Cage-sama. Temari waved her hand to the villagers, her CL. Oak moving with the desert wind. We will, she said with a smile as she waved her fan. Kankuro, however, rolling his eyes and said, not like he needs bodyguards anyway, upset he had to leave, he'd rather stay home and work on his new creation. Gara said simply as he turned his back to the villagers, all right. Let's go. he said in his steady voice. Kankuro was about to say something but a shadow in Da flash caught the San siblings' attention. Yes, Anbu-san, Gaara said as in Konoha Anbu approached him. He was strong enough to take on this Anbu and he didn't feel any negative or aggressive auras. From the Mansa they wouldn't do anything brash. I have a message from the Hokage, the Anbu said in a soft voice, bowing as he handed the cage his scroll. Gaara read the scroll carefully. He at it just to be sure of what Konoha was asking. What is it about Gaara? Temari asked, curious about the message. We are to meet and travel with the Hokage, Gaara said as his eyes were fixated on the handwriting. It seemed familiar. Why? Kankuro asked, confused as of why Leaf would make such a request. Seems to me a sort of symbol of our new alliance, Temari said aloud, more to herself and to the others present, to show our unity with each Leaf, Temari thought with her highly intelligent political science remark. When in reality it was Naruto wanting to pull a prank on Gaara. Sound. DS about right, Kankuro said, thinking that it was the right time to sound like he knew what was being said around him, when he really didn't have a clue. Yay, Kankuro, Temari said, seeing Hiro the little game her younger brother was playing. Enough now, Anbu-san, you may leave, he said as the nin nodded, bowed and left for home. Off to the summit, the Mizukage ran with the wind as she followed Chojuro and outtailing her. As the time passed she couldn't help but feel the loss of warmth at her side, the lonely feeling that she knew her home would be empty when she returned. The thought that always stayed with her was that she in fact needed a man. She was an old-fashioned type when it came to her men. She wanted a man that was powerful, a man that would protect her, and with her being a cage-level nin that already gave her slim pickings. She would want a man that had that rugged look about his face, not some fancy high-nosed spoiled daimyo, but a war hero, a man with a few scars. A man that was tough and knew when to take over, that knew when to tell her off and call her a slew. Her mind was racing, her body was heating and getting damp, sweat was forming in more than one place. She prayed that her bodyguards were concentrating on the surroundings and not herself. She heard Ao say something. Not being in the mood, she immediately cut him off. Say any more and I'll kill you, she said in a horny and angry mood. Ao just stopped in his tracks. He was just saying what lovely weather it was and she cut him off with another death threat. Geez, what did he do? He thought, scratching his head in confusion. Chojuro was as equally confused, trying to lighten up the mood. He said the first thing that came to his mind. Now, summit, here we come, he said as everyone else sweat dropped. Faster, Akazuki, faster, the old cage yelled as he rode his bodyguard like a betting horse. We are nearly there, Akazuki said in a serious voice. I can't make it, stop, the old cage said in an injured voice. His old eyes saw a green bush to the side. He rushed as fast as a cage could run. He turned a corner for privacy and let nature run its course. Akazuki, I looked at the smaller Jonin. You had to feed him some of that ramen crap, didn't you? He said, shaking his head disapprovingly. I didn't know it would do that, Kurozuchi said, trying toffing fit. He's an old man. You know he would have been crowning by the time we were too far from any of the public toilets, Akazuki said. The sound of 10-kilogram heavy mud landing against the ground came their ears. Then a pained voice screaming to the heavens. My hips, the cage screamed. Are you ready, Naruto-kun? Shizune said, seeing the Hokage in full uniform. Wait a sec, Shizune said, pulling down Hokage hat's veil. Let's make it a big surprise for everyone, she said with a small chuckle. I'm ready, Naruto said as the doors opened, hearing the full blast of the masses below, ready to celebrate a new part of their village. A new part of their history. The morning clouds parted as the rising sun emerged. Citizens and shinobi, merchants and famers, the young and elderly all gathered together. For the ceremonial Hokage announcement. Every citizen was waiting for their new leader impatiently, all at a single spot, a truly amazing sight for any and all to see. Guy-sensei, Lee, Guy-sensei, Lee, Ga, would you guys cut it out already? The angry Tenten yelled as the crowd of innocent civilians and children cringed at the sight of two men holding each other, with a sunset in the background. The crowd gave a small thankful applause to the savior of the moment and then went about their business. Tenten blushed at the attention, and as it soon faded she shot a deadly glare at the gray N-Beast duo as she continued to rant off her early morning fumes. You two can have your borderline homosexual moments at some other time, she said, talking over their responses filled with comments. We're not gay, and such. Right now we and every single citizen and ninja of Konoha is here. Can you two behave without me being reminded of your spandex, steroid-enhanced eyebrow ways, she said in way a mother disciplines her child. But, no buts, she said cutting off Lee before he could even start. Be quiet, be still and no hugging, she said finishing it off with an unsheathed kunai being unleashed. Neji just watched with a smirk as the top taijutsu shinobi get talked down to like mere children, who knew she had that sort of a temper. Hush now, I believe the ceremonial induction is beginning. Gee, Neji said trying to calm his rather dysfunctional team down. The other three quieted down as more and more civilians and shinobi gathered to the small cliff. The mind of a shadow genius slowly and strategically thought about what his father told him in secret, of one of his close friends, Naruto Uzumaki, was being appointed temporary Hokage and if voted, the actual 6th Hokage. Naruto Uzumaki, Rokudaime Hokage, has a nice spin to it. Shikamaru smiled happily as he thought of what joy Naruto was going through, to have his dreams, so suddenly and so quickly. He and Gaara were probably the youngest Kages of all time. He remembered the times his fellow classmates mocked Naruto for still being a genin, and now he made the spring to the most powerful position in all of Konoha. Unfortunately, his strategic mind couldn't help but go over the negatives and the downs in his personality, the hows or ifs, in the conversation of Naruto. He was a very, very troublesome man. He sighed as his gaze was caught and fixated at the lone cloud in the shady sky. He was a very, very, very troublesome man. Sigh, and now he was his leader. Damn, but a troublesome man or not, Shikamaru would risk his life for the blonde. He had done so much in return for his own safety and the safety for his loved ones, it would be enough for Shikamaru to do. As he thought more on the subject, an irritated Yamanaka looked at a silent Nara. Deciding to have a little fun while the rest of the late sleepers joined for the ceremony, she gave a little finger jab to the temple. Why are you so quiet, Shika? Ino said as she poked the lazy shadow manipulator. Oh, nothing, he trailed off as his gaze followed the few morning clouds that so easily attracted his attention. Ino growled at the small attention span of the so-called genius. Seriously, what would it take for him to pay attention, for goodness sake? While all this commotion was accruing, Choji munched happily on his brand new barbecue potato chips, while he watched Ino talk down Shika as he tried his best to ignore her. While that would be hard for any normal human, he has years of experience from ignoring a far more annoying mother than this weaker version of his mum. Shika, she said as she poked him in the temple. Poke, Shika, poke, Shika, poke, Shika. Choji just sat back and laughed at the Shikamaru's expression changing to different shades of anger. Annoyed all the way to murderous. Before the next poke could stab him in the temple, Choji finally put a halt to the little show they were playing. He could see the flag sing and several people emerging from the tents. The people around him slowly settled down, and as the sounds could be heard was the morning bird rising from their sleep, singing beautifully to the crowds that waited impatiently below. Ino still wanted a reaction from the lazy man though. Poke, damn it Ino, shut up Akamaru, the dog barked his reply. No, you shut up, another bark or reply in the Inuzuka clan. The rest of Kiba's team separated from the noisy dog boy as he got into another argument over what species was better. It usually ended into a fist and paw fight between the two pups. Now usually Shino or Hinata would settle the issue down before it went too far, but unfortunately the other two would find themselves buried within their own thoughts. Usually Hinata would call a Kamaru away, or Shino would distract Kiba with an interesting bug that would catch his attention. The Hyuga was in a particularly deep trance as she thought of her only love. Hinata's mind was racing ever since she has been fully conscious. She remembered her confession. Unfortunately it all goes black after that. Her face is still red with the thought. Shino has his collar even higher than usual. His shades were planted firmly on his face, hiding his eyes from anyone's view. Humans never like the ability to not see into a person's eyes, it is unnerving. And Shino was in the League WITH Kakashi about how much he would reveal about himself, so it was hard enough to know what he was thinking. But deep down in the depths of the young manipulator's mind, the news his father had told to him in secret, an S-ranked secret to be exact, was, well, disturbing. It was a secret about the Yondaime Hokage and one of his closest friends, Naruto Uzumaki. All while the commotion of waking U.P. earlier and complaints from the younger generation were heard, especially the songs of birds and the concerned talks between friends, the outrageous fits between the shinobi teams. Sakura and Sai, Each talked to the other, idly chatting about nothing right now, neither expecting what dramatic change will happen, only expecting a new Hokage to announce their position. Hidden Hokage emerges for small second. The arrangements went to the detail, first the twin advisors, both to the right side of the Hokage, symbolizing the Hokage's involvement with politics, then the Anbu captain and Jonin commander to the left, symbolizing the Hokage's military involvement and power overall in the village. Shikaku was the first to step up. The entire crowd was silent, except a loud groan from the Jonin commander's son. He sped through a small jutsu that allowed his voice to be heard far, for all to hear. He cleared his throat and quickly began a troublesome speech. We are here today, he paused, to mourn the past and embrace the future, he said, finished with a small cough. I am here to present you the man who will lead us through these dark times. The tent doors parted as a figure dressed entirely of the ceremonial Hokage robes. He approached the small wooden ledge and placed his hands firmly down as the crowd politely applauded their new leader. Naruto grinned as he nodded to his Jonin commander. Shikaku smirked as he continued. Your new Hokage, he paused. Naruto's grin was set firmly as he awaited the reactions. He placed his hand on his Hode. Shikaku finished his short speech. Naruto Uzumaki, the sixth Hokage. The very crowd was in shock. The hero of Konoha was now its leader. The elders were in deep thought as of the skills that Naruto would bring to the position, while the younger generation wouldn't give a heap. The younger members of the crowd began shouting and screaming for their newly appointed leader. The ninja applauded as the civilians went crazy with the new revelation. He was their leader. He had protected them from hell and more. Who else could be any better for the position? The roar of the crowd seemed to never stop, the smiles, the whistles and cheers. For Naruto was a bit overwhelming as a small warm tear fell down his right eye as it slowly made its way down his cheek. He never, ever thought this moment would happen, even after he was officially appointed Hokage. He really thought that Tsunade would awaken from her forced slumber, or the council would decide against him, or the daimyo would reconsider his decision, or. He didn't really know, but he knew that it is now officially his dream of making his speech to the loving villagers below, was now a reality. It was happening now and he couldn't be happier. The applause and cheering didn't seem to stop or slow down as Naruto wiped his tear and raised his hand, indicating he was ready to speak. The crowd's cheers lowered and lowered to the silence, ignoring the few people yelling at the top of their lungs, "We love you," and such. He spoke to himself, reading his wavering voice as it was weak with emotion and nervousness from public speaking. He was never one to speaking to large crowds. Sigh. He was getting the attention he wanted as a child, so he should be sort of happy. He breathed steadily and slowly as he looked out at the countless heads staring directly at him, all wondering when he would begin. He counted down as the jutsu was soon applied to his voice, allowing all to hear him. Citizens and shinobi of Konoha, he paused as the cheering began again. He let out a happy sigh as he needed a small break. We have suffered, he said as the cheering slowed down. We as a people have suffered, he said, gaining small confidence at the looks of admiration from his listeners. We have suffered death and destruction on he paused again as he regained his breathing, not trying to get too ahead of himself. Death and destruction, whether it is from a war we wanted no part in, whether it is an invasion, whether it is from shinobi, Akatsuki or demon, he paused after saying demon. Seeing our homes burn, families die, it is a sight I never wished for my people. Yet it is what makes us, the people of Konoha, strong, he said, putting emphasis on the word strong. Would any other village survive 3 wars? He shook his head as the Chirin G slowly clapped to the facts he brought up. Would any other village survive an attack from a not one village, but 2 and become the victor as the day ended? He said as he shook his head again. Igno. Ring the cheer as it slowly got louder and louder. Would any village survive against the might of Akatsuki and emerge as the victor? He shook his head again as he waited for the masses below to calm. Would any village, at all, survive the might of the 9-tailed demon and not only survive, but prosper and become the great and strong village we were, that we are? He paused, slightly happy. Had the ones who knew the truth didn't stop or lessen in their clapping. Yet for some unknown reason, to every foreign village out there, after every attack, every invasion, we rebuild, and leave the dark times behind us and prosper. He paused again as the cheering roared again. We prosper, he paused. We prosper as the dominant force of the shinobi lands, he shouted over the very, very loud cheers from the young genin. We have suffered, no one can deny it, he said as he looked downwards as he had to finally reveal his secret. But as a village, we will stand together. We will rebuild and prosper once again, he said, finishing his speech to the masses below as the roar of applause seemed to reach its climax as the cheering never seemed to stop. Naruto smiled as he rose his hand. The crowd seemed to calm somewhat and Naruto felt somewhat awkward with this unofficial control over the villagers. As being so young, I would understand that some of the older more experienced citizens of Konoha would be doubtful of my position, he spoke carefully. The crowd went quiet as some of the younger members of the crowd had the nerve to even glare at their parents and grandparents for just making their Hokage and hero doubt himself. But if you give me the opportunity, just one chance, that's all I ask of, he spoke carefully. And as the newly appointed Hokage, I have already made my first law and I have disbanded one previous law, he paused as he readied his announcement that would change not his village but that of the other villages, Iwa, Kumo especially. The first was an S-ranked secret hiding my father and mother's name from me all these years. The silence was filled with innocent curiosity. I will announce my family's blood, the Uzumaki clan and the Namikaze clan. Unlike last time, there was no applause, no cheers, but whispers. People tore their vision away from their leader and talked among themselves, whispering and talking, only talkin'. Small glances to see the large amount of similarities between the fourth and, now, the sixth. The color of the hair, the style and length. Naruto was shorter than his two fathers, but he was still early in his years. The medium build, and deep blue eyes that made the woman gaga. The defined and lean body, the stone-cut muscles and small scars from past battles. The really only difference was the large whisker marks or birthmarks. Or whatever that gave a feral, foreign look that seemed outlandish and so masculine to most women. And to the few people that had the privilege to know both men Luz enough could see the similarities in their personalities, most silently berated themselves as it was so obvious now that the cloak was taken away from their eyes. Both were strong and resourceful on the punch, smart and strategic when needed. While Minato was a fair bit smarter and calmer, while Naruto was a bit hot-headed and less smarter than his father, he more than made up with the EU traits he picked up from his loving mother. Minato was a calm and collected man at all times, he was creative and imaginative, was a loyal man, to his friends and eventually woman, he was consider. By most the most powerful of shinobi and loyal friend to all, and feared rival and enemy. He was not that physically strong or fast, but he used his wits and superior chakra control and creative jutsus to defeat his enemies. His supposed mother was the beautiful, hot-headed, tomboy from Whirlpool, while most considered her a simple one and done woman on the long list of the infamous Yondaime. Both of them saw something in one another and one thing led to another as love was slowly formed in secret. Not much was known about Kushina, apart from a few small facts: green eyes, red hair, from a faraway land. A destroyed village and a killed clan. Naruto rose his left hand, and the gossip suddenly came to a stop, eyes all resting again on him. Sigh, he would never get used to this. My father is a good man. I love my father and my mother, but right now, my duty is to you, to the people of this village, he said as the crowd was still silent. But my people, these dark times are never to leave us as long as the thread known simply as Akatsuki, he said as he paused as the crowd booed at the name of the accursed organization. He smiled at the reaction. Gaining some sort of confidence he continued. I have been summoned to a meeting with the cages of the major villages. We will meet in neutral grounds and discuss our means to end the damned organization that has caused us so much. He paused at the word, pain. While I will be away, my sensei Kakashi shall take my place at Summit. Kakashi will organize the supplies and safety of border and on my return we will begin the reconstruction of our village, he finished as the crowd once again clapped and cheered for Naruto and the future of the village. As Naruto waved to the people one final time, he passed through the tent's door. He saw a couch and ran for it before his knees gave out. He dived face first and gave out a sigh of relaxation. Before he could feel sweet slumber approach, he called for an Anbu, Neko, he called the first Anbu's name that came to mind, a woman with flowing dark purple hair and a cat Anbu mask and uniform. Yes, Hokage-sama, she said in her militarized tone. Send for, he thought of the calmest and safest bet. Nara, Shikamaru, and who else would be useful in a way he could protect himself and show the strength of Konoha in times of weakness. Hyuga, Neji, that is all, he said as he slowly and surely fell to a deep and happily welcomed nap, even if it was for a short while. Uzumaki, the man whispered as he stared down at the genin photo. A surge of chakra made him look up at the plant-like figure bowing before him. Changes are going to made, he said as he calculated what changes were needed. Bring me Sasuke, his team, and he thought of the best candidate for the job he had prepared. Kisame. Naruto placed his Hokage hat on his back, and turned to the many citizens and shinobi waving goodbye to the loved Hokage. Shikamaru just stared at the clouds with his hands in his pockets, while Neji used his Byakugan to scout ahead of where they were heading off to. Kakashi walked closer to the trio as Kakashi saluted to his superior. Be careful with yourself and think before you speak, Kakashi said with a wide-eye smirk. I will, he said to his former sensei. And don't you abuse your powers too much, Naruto sighed. To his sensei as he thought of all the fun he could have. Especially with one green beast of Konoha. Watch over Tsunade and take care of yourself, Naruto said as he signaled to his bodyguards to be ready. He waved one final goodbye to the good people of Konoha and left in a puff of smoke. The cage of Suna waited patiently for his fellow Kage. He wished he could say the same for his siblings, he really wished he could. Sometimes he wondered what the previous homicidal version would do in these certain situations. God, what's taking them so long? Temari screamed at no one as she couldn't take staying still much longer. Since no one answered back, she took her anger out on a large amount of trees as she made a powerful wind slice jutsu. While the destruction ceased, Gaara just shook his head as he watched his beloved sister calm down somewhat as Kankuro just sneered at how much his sister could get away with. They are late, his only brother said in an upset voice. Gaara looked at the position of the sun and seeing as they have waited for over an hour he knew his siblings would start to get irritated. By the time they get here we won't make that much ground before dark, Gaara concluded. Kankuro was about to speak before in the distance he saw three figures and felt the large chakra sources come closer. Finally, Temari whispered as she approached her brother's left side and Kankuro to his right. Danzo watched from afar as the crowds have cheered and waved goodbyes for their new leader. Danzo sneered as his final backup plan was destroyed right in front of his face. He hoped that the elders of the village would convince the younger against the decision of the council. It was far-fetched of course, but it was all he had left. But Naruto made a fatal flaw, which he was going to exploit to the fullest. He smirked as he signaled for his bodyguards. His two closest and strongest root members appeared bowing before him. You called for us, Fu said in an emotionless voice. I have plans for you and Torun, he said, believing if done properly, it could change everything. On the day the Hokage leaves, at midnight, we will begin an assassination plot against Tsunade, he said. Gather 10 of your fellow root members, the strongest of them all, he said as he pulled out a set of headbands. But most importantly, no bloodlines, we don't want anyone knowing. We were involved at all, he said as he threw 7 Iwa headbands to the root members. Place these on at my signal, and follow my plans to the T, he said as he chuckled a small evil laugh. Good night, Htao, she said softly as she closed the door to her personal room. She sighed at the sight of an empty bed and a cold room. She pulled her silk robe down as it slowly and gracefully slipped off her slender shoulders. As she slowly and sleepily made her way to bed, the moonlight illuminated her skin, making her look like a goddess as she closed into her comfortable bed. Her vision came across a small vanity mirror. She was now entering her late 20s, and she knew she would never say the true number that killed her a tiny bit whenever it was spoken. She could see the small signs that her age was showing. Nothing like wrinkles or the sort, but as her bare skin touched the cool sheets of her bed, she shivered in a sad way. Her mind thought of Mon's touch, a man's warmth, a simple word to her that would leave her stunned and unwilling to make her move away from him. The more she thought about her single woman woes, her bed suddenly got colder and colder. To feel 2 strong arms hold her in comfort and protect her with or without her wanting him to. To know that she wouldn't be alone anymore, to know she wouldn't be judged, wouldn't be objectified, wouldn't be looked down upon, but to be a person who was respected and loved. A small tear escaped her jade green eyes. She hoped her single life woes will end soon. If only she knew. Greetings, Hokage-sama, Gaara said suspiciously as he eyed the masked Hokage. The Hokage bowed his head in respect to his allied Kage of the West, while both bodyguards went to a knee in the presence of the 2 Kages. Naruto noticed that the Sand siblings had all changed from their normal clothing since last he saw them. Gaara had his usual 100-kilo gorge on his back with some new symbols drawn upon it, his cage hat secured around his waist and long red desert scarf around his neck, hanging loosely by his knees. He also wore dark Anbu-like trousers and long-sleeved shirt with his Jonin jacket to end it off. Temari had her hair in her traditional 4 ponytails and had moved her headband to her forehead holding her fringe out. She too had a desert scarf. Unlike Gaara's blood red, hers was a clean white and covered most of her torso. She had a short skirt on and fishing net underneath, long shin pads and shoes on, and a white cape at the back, while she had all her packing underneath her and a large summoning scroll at the back of her hip. And Kankuro, well, he has, a different shade of make-you war paint. Gaara and Temari eyed the hidden Hokage, Kankuro especially, as he was looking forward to seeing the busty slug princess. Now seeing a normal-sized man seemed to disappoint him, rather than make him suspicious of the man. Hokage-sama, would you please unmask yourself? Gaara said suspiciously. Why, of course, Kage-sama, he said as he slowly removed the fabric ever so slowly. To reveal, the fountain of youth shines brightly on this beautiful day. Kage-sama. All present were bold, experienced, hardcore shinobi in every sense, but the henge that was so damn realistic to the point that it was eye-watering. A small puff and a chuckling Naruto later, bro. UGHT, everyone out of their funk and back to life. Naruto, what the hell are you doing here? Kankuro yelled as he pointed a finger at the laughing blonde. As glad as I am to see you, I was expecting the. Gaara's mind went to work at the presence of his best friend. Congratulations on the promotion, Gaara said with an unusual smirk across his face, proud of his brother's achievement. What? Temari said, confused at what he said. Spoilsport, Naruto said with a smirk to match Hito, explained Gaara. Kankuro said, scratching his temple at what the two were saying to one another. Gaara stood next to Naruto as he held his arm out. I present you the Rokudaime Hokage of Konoha, he said with an uncharacteristic laugh. Shizune watched Sakura perform a routine checkup on the comatose Tsunade. The green glow caught her attention as she watched the small glow slowly heal any unseen wounds. She looked out towards the night sky, feeling a bit worried for no reason. Something was out there watching her. She felt a shiver run up her spine as she hurriedly closed the curtains and brushed the feeling off as she handled some hospital paperwork that needed to be finished. At least we do some ground, Gaara said as he pointed at their position on the high-budget map. Another day and we'll make it by noon, Naruto said, calculating the distance and how fast the group was as a whole. Quote, I guess we should make camp, Shikamaru said as he looked around at the surroundings. Couldn't we find a tavern or something? Temari said as she looked desperately for the symbol representing an inn on the map. Temari was a hardcore tomboy of a shinobi, but she had grown accustomed to a bed over a hard, insect-infested ground. There's one about half an hour to the east, Shikamaru pointed out on the map. Right, it's decided then, Temari said aloud as she grabbed her pack. Some thought to disagree, but all thought it was a bit too troublesome for them to argue with the determined Kunoichi. Hey, all grabbed their packs and made their way to their new destination. Curious about how Naruto ended out as the Hokage, Temari asked as politely as she could. Yo Blondie, how did you end up the Hokage anyway? Running low on good shinobi already, Temari said in a teasing tone. Temari, said Gaara, trying to sound formal but was just as curious as his older sister. Naruto chuckled as he walked to the inn. Neji just stayed in the back with his Byakugan flaring wildly, looking at all directions. I was promoted for an array of reasons, 2 more than the rest I would guess, he said as his Han. D pulled his Hokage hat off to hang off his neck. Tsunade was, is, in a comatose state. She, pushed herself a bit far during the invasion and then her body just couldn't keep up with all the strain, he said. A little bit uncomfortable speaking about his only mother figure in his life in such a vulnerable position. And I guess the second reason would have to be the fact that I defeated the invaders, he said in an honest and humble tone, not noticing the small gaps in both Kankuro and Temari's mouth. The invaders, you mean Pain and his bodies, Kankuro said in a shocked tone. Kind of, he said again in that modest tone that seemed a bit off to the Sand siblings. Expect Gaara, wondering why he wasn't embracing the attention as he would have as a child. Gaara knew Naruto was past the phase of needed attention. As a Kage he most certainly has his own fair share of his attention from the villagers. Gaara went through it, it was pretty amusing to say. Someone like him go through what he went through with his very eyes. The small trip to the inn was pretty uneventful, small talks here and there, most kept their thoughts to themselves as they nodded. The sun setting was a bit concerning to a shinobi, but to know that they were all very skilled shinobi, especially with 2 cages among their ranks, they were a little less worried. The group pasted a rather steep hill to come across the small inn. Nothing special about it, it was a dark brown color covered the walls, while the roof was a dark rusted green, a small stable filled with a few animals. A small sign outside the door was hanging off a small ledger, with what might have been red paint, which has long gone and replaced with dirt and rust, with a few letters that Neji was able to make out as, the Grey Dragon. Everyone sighed at the condition that they in was. Shikamaru really wasn't bothered as he finally found a place to just sleep and carry on with his cloud watching. Neji and Gaara weren't bothered at all as they found the place alright and suitable for the night, while Temari was rather disappointed at the sight of the inn. "So, we're here, I guess," Kankuro said, scratching his cheek. Rubbing the war paint off slightly. "Better than nothing, I guess," Naruto shrugged as he led the way to the inn. The rest of the group followed in suit as they made their way to the old inn. Naruto was the first to open without a care. Neji watched the tavern with his Byakugan flaring, so Naruto wasn't expecting anything unexpected. As the group entered, they came across a surprising sight of a decent to not that bad looking inn. It had a counter with an elderly lady reading a small book in one hand next to a small candle, 2 wooden tables, a few chairs, a lit fireplace, and a bookcase filled with what seemed like outdated, worn-out books and novels by persons Naruto or any of his particular group had known. Naruto and Gaara approached the elderly man whose vision didn't seem to notice the new members in his humble business. Gaara coughed to catch the man's attention. The man seemed startled by the sound, but he regained himself. "Welcome, young ones, to the Grey Dragon. Best service in all the lands," the man said with a proud voice. "I am your honored host Daichi, and you are," he said, asking for their names. Gaara, Naruto. "How many rooms, sirs?" he said as he pulled a small leather book out. "6 please," said Gaara. "We have 9 available, so take your pick," Daichi said, scribbling down some notes as Gaara handed a small purse of gold coins on the counter. Temari and Kankuro raced for the cozy-looking chairs by the fireplace and let out a heavy sigh as they landed on the chairs. Shikamaru and Neji quietly sat at the table, both bored and thinking. EP thought that as until Shikamaru's keen eye came across a small shogi board laid across the top of the bookshelf. "Do you have any sake?" Kankuro shouted. Kakashi grabbed his hair in frustration as more and more documents came into his desk by an all-too-eager Shizune, whom seems too happy to give him this unholy amount of paperwork. Kakashi looked at the small amount of paperwork that Naruto had filled out within the 3 days. And to say the least, he was very impressed. He had removed any civilian council member from the village council and created a smaller side council that's power and decisions are based on and only civilian matters. Tsunade, Hiruzen, even Minato had tried moving the stubborn, spoiled, inbreed civilians to a position of lesser power, but none could find a way. Being Hokage didn't mean your word was law. It just had a high amount of influence, would be the best word to say. But Naruto somehow find that with the distraction of the invasion he made a small amount of paperwork, making the offer for the civilian council to be turned into the smaller council that they are now. Naturally all the council members would be against this without a second thought. But with the distraction of the invasion, the time slot for any argument against the change, no one came, and so the decision was made final and the citizen council was made. That wasn't all he had planned. Naruto had builders coming from Suna, Wave and Snow, medics and medicine coming from foreign lands that Shizune probably recommended for Naruto. Naruto moved Anbu from protecting the city board, and brought them in to protect the more vulnerable targets, hospitals, granaries, shelters, and so. As Kakashi went through more and more paperwork, he felt a small pressure in the air as his senses went haywire. Kakashi handled the situation like the pro he is. He continued writing as his closed Sharingan eye opened beneath his closed headband. His gift from his old teammate definitely came in handy as it easily saw through the thick fabric of his headband. Kakashi felt the several Anbu surrounding him hiding in an Anbu-like manner, but these presences, their chakra signals, they were too well hidden for his likes. Using his past Anbu experience, he could our shinobi were not on any assassination attempt on his life. They were too far away and he was far too heavily protected for just around a 3-man squad. It was merely a stakeout squad. Kakashi couldn't make a move without them noticing, and the same would be said of the team watching him, as the second they moved away from their position he would signal for an ambush squad and he would be on them in less than 20 seconds. He sighed as he continued his work. Somehow, in this life-threatening situation he still has to do the blasted paperwork. So what's the plan? Naruto said as he drank a small amount of sake, frowning at the bitter taste. To my knowledge, this meeting will revolve around Akatsuki, but cages these days. Who knows where it might lead off to? Gaara said as he snatched the bottle out of Naruto's hands. A beautiful woman approached Naruto with a predatory look in her eye. Is there anything else I can at you? She said, winking at the sixth Hokage, placing her hand on his shoulder, rubbing it softly while trying to stare at Naruto's avoiding eyes. We are fine, Gaara said as politely as he could. You sure? She said, trying to push her cleavage to the Naruto's line of sight. Completely, Naruto yelled a bit louder than he wanted to. Well, that's fine, but remember, she said with a hushed voice. Naruto had no chance but to look at the dark brown eyes of the intrusive waitress. I am available at all times, and I'm willing to do anything for the costumer. Her hand traveled down from his shoulder to his chest, groping it slightly while talking in that voice that would revive Jiraiya from the dead. Thanks, he said, never quite sure how to say no to someone so aggressive with their signals. She winked one final time as she left with her shapely hips moving in the most alluring way. Hell, Gaara even looked, and that's saying something. Naruto just had one thought left in his mind. Don't order room service. So what do you know about the other cages? Naruto asked, shaking his head of the waitress and any Ika scenarios. I've met a few of them, but not all, Gaara said as he stared at particularly nothing, taking another gulp of cold sake. The Raikage is very headstrong and in my experience easily excited with the thought of battle and war, Gaara continued. He is more of a ninja than politician. He's as stubborn as you on a bad day. He sighed. That was a given. I don't like him, he said with a frown. He's very elitist to say the least, saying the WEAK don't deserve to live doesn't fit well with me, Gaara said as he passed the bottle to Naruto. The Tsuchikage, Gaara gave a small giggle, as old, really old. He is the most stubborn man you will ever meet. He is a very proud man, perhaps too proud to admit his time has gone. He strikes me as a man that won't be pleased to meet the son of the man who decimated half his forces, Gaara said about the small cage. And the Mizukage, Naruto said, making a face at the bitter taste that didn't seem to leave. And the Mizukage, I haven't had the pleasure of meeting her yet, Gaara sighed. Gesturing for the near-empty bottle, she seems to be the only normal cage, he paused. Excluding myself obviously, Gaara said with a cocky smirk, taking the bottle out of Naruto's hand. Obviously, she seems to want to bring her country past their civil war times and into a new age, etc., Gaara said in a drunken tone. That's all I really know. I haven't really gotten to know them all personally. I wouldn't trust any of them right now, Gaara said, taking another sip, only to groan as the sake seemed to have disappeared. Right now? Gaara paused, looking a little green. Right now? I really can't believe this meeting will make a difference, he said, taking another sip of the empty bottle and groaning again. This won't work, Naruto frowned at the drunk Gaara. And why won't it? Nowhere as drunk as his friend, Naruto replied in a slightly angry tone. Gaara paused at the tone and gathered himself slightly. The Tsuchikage is old and stubborn and past his prime. The Raikage is an elitist, easily taunted and in a real emotional situation with his brother missing. He paused as he placed his bottle down. The Mizukage is a nobody trying to shish for more respect. He looked at the bottle and then at Naruto. And who are we? Gaara laughed bitterly. 2 16-year-olds, former village pariahs, in a job that is made for the loved and the elderly. Gaara stayed silent after saying that. Naruto felt Gaara's mood drop. Temari and Shikamaru watched as Gaara stared absently at his quickly emptying bottle. In a quiet and unsure voice Gaara spoke. Softly, who's to say if we weren't cages, would anything have changed? Naruto looked around as he heard the room grow still. He saw Temari giving Gaara a sisterly look. Shikamaru and Neji were speechless and wondered what to do. Kankuro, still passed out, laid out awkwardly across a bearskin near the lit fireplace. Naruto sighed as he pinched the bridge of his nose. He looked outside and ECIDED. This was best suited for a private conversation between the two. Naruto frowned at Gaara's depressed aura. Gaara, come with me. Please. He motioned for him to follow as each bodyguard, excluding a passed-out Kankuro, stood to match their leaders. Gaara reached for a sake bottle, drinking it in long gulps as he left with Naruto. We will be fine. I'm sure we can handle any nuisance out here, nah. Naruto said with a strong smile towards Neji and Shikamaru, while Gaara simply motioned for his conscious sister to stay. Come this way. There were 10 guards, 1 at the door, another 2 inside. A team of 4 watched the perimeter. 1 watched the team, 1 stayed in the tent's neighbor. 1 was hanged as an old drunk that hung around the newly made tavern, by Tsunade's tent. Each were skilled in the fine arts of the ninja, espionage, sabotage, infiltration and assassination. They excelled, they killed, they've protected, they've been through it all. Each were killed in less than a minute. Naruto led Gaara outside by the side of the inn. He followed in a semi-drunk walk. They were a decent distance as far as Gaara could tell. Naruto stopped and turned facing the current cage. There's something you need to say, Naruto said as he crossed his arms. What? Gaara said in a more sober tone, yet taking another drink of sake didn't help matters right now. You know what? Naruto paused, seeing if Gaara will bite. He didn't. If you go in there, with some kind of agenda against the other cages, you will ruin any chance for our alliance, Naruto said with a straight and serious face on. Tell me what's going on, Naruto yelled at Gaara. I just can't stand them, Gaara said in small voice. What was that? Naruto said, not understanding what Gaara had mumbled under their breath. I hate them, Gaara said, shocking Naruto. Why? Naruto said, confused. I hate them, he said as he shook his head. I hate them all. He turned away from Naruto. Naruto reached out to Gaara, grabbing his shoulder. Why? Naruto said, completely confused to Gaara's behavior. Why? Gaara uncharacteristically yelled at his best friend. They are the ones who ordered the damn demons into us, he yelled, throwing his sake bottle to ground, pointing to his stomach. They are the ones who started it all, he said in a steadier voice. They pulled any form of friendship from me. They pulled my family from me. They took my mother and father and replaced them with nightmares, he yelled at Naruto, confused as he expected him to understand. They took everything from me. He paused as he imagined his father pulling his siblings away from him as he approached. Everything, he yelled. And it all changed. After we fought, I changed. He paused, out of breath. Naruto paused. He never had it easy, but Gaara, he had even worse. He was truly alone. Did you hear me? I changed. Me, Gaara said as he slowed down. Why did I have to change? Why? To please the people, to please those damn cages. To please he yelled his father's name out. I don't understand, Naruto said. Why did I have to change from a mass-murdering demon to their hero when it was the people who changed me into this demon? Gaara pleaded. I just want to know, Gaara said, calming down swiftly. That if they, he said, pointing out at a random direction. Naruto assumed he meant the other cages, and when he means the other cages, he means his father. Didn't put this damn demon in my gut, he said, pointing at his gut. How much could have changed? He paused, slightly out of breath. Naruto sighed. Have you ever wondered? Gaara asked in his calm voice. Wondered what? Naruto asked. If the fox never came to your village. Naruto looked down when Gaara asked. He hadn't expected it. Your father, your Hokage, would have never died. The word stung. Your mother could be alive now. Each and every word stung. They would never hated you, us. Naruto slugged Gaara right in the chin, faster than Gaara expected. Even his San never expected that sort of speed from the blonde. He landed hard on the ground, anger building inside him. He attempted to rise from his feet. Shut the hell up, Naruto yelled at Gaara, freezing him in his tracks. Naruto bent down and grabbed his t-shirt, pulling him eye to eye with the taller blonde. You can't blame them, Naruto said slowly and loudly so it would get through. Me and you, he said, looking deep down Naruto's blue eyes, can't blame them. If we start thinking what ifs for right now, we will miss everything that is happening right now, he yelled right at Gaara. His sand shifted below his feet as he held the lightweight cage off his feet. And what happening right now is a meeting that will decide if our precious people live or not, Naruto yelled. And Gaara, you are one of my precious people, and I love you like a brother, he continued, but if you are going to go into that summit and even consider risking your village and mine, he stopped. Eden placed Gaara down as his demonic sand settled. I will end you, Naruto said softly. I don't want to, but if you toy with the fact that our childhoods were fucked up, I won't let you risk hundreds of others because of your selfishness, Naruto threatened. Naruto saw the look of regret in Gaara's eyes. He placed his hand on his shoulder. Go inside and have a rest. It's been a long day. Once you wake up we will talk. Hopefully a little soberer, okay? He asked Gaara in a soft voice. Gaara nodded and turned. He noticed that Naruto didn't come back with him. He called out, Naruto, where or why? Oh, you going? He asked, slightly scared that he may have upset his best friend. I just need to get out of that room. I'm gonna go to the river for a wash, he said with his back turned. Besides that, it's starting to smell like Kankuro's balls. Naruto laughed and Gaara smiled. And how do you know what Kankuro's balls smell like? Gaara said, using his wit against the blonde. I've smelt your breath, Naruto yelled as his body disappeared as a hand made of sand and earth emerged from beneath him and grabbed the shadow clone. Gaara just shook his head. They'll turn anyone into a cage these days, he said with a smile. While all Naruto could think was, bloody sake. Danzo slowly walked down the empty road, the sound of laughter and happiness in the background as he approached the once heavily protected tent. He looked at a small party of people laughing and enjoying a drink with close friends. One of the patrons looked at the war hawk. Danzo nodded and the genjutsu fell, revealing an Anbu officer with a wide-open throat. Dry blood spread across his torso. A root member fell to the empty road and bowed to his superior and picked the corpse up. Danzo just continued to make his way to his target, slowly but surely. Temari watched with an older sibling frown as Gaara entered, nursing a fresh bruise on the bottom of his chin. She smiled though as she could instantly notice the eased aura that surrounded him. Apparently he just needed some sense knocked into him, and again Naruto was the man needed to thank for this. She absently waved off Gaara as he said he needed some sleep, so she led him off to his room. Her mind was elsewhere. Naruto Uzumaki. How much has she done for her brother, her family, her country? She needed to see him, if not just to thank him. It wouldn't be that hard to detect a chakra source like his. She called forfeit on her game against the dull Nara. She sighed, what she ever saw in that shadow nin anyway. Danzo saw the symbol of the Hokage on the dirty white tent. His cane and slow walk was the only sounds for what seems like miles. He clutched the tent's door and opened it slightly. His vision seemed unfazed with the sight of 3 corpses, each Anbu, each far from alive. Tsunade laid helplessly to Danzo's hands, so valuable, so mortal, it was too easy. He unsheathed his blade, the moonlight reflected off the razor-sharp sword in an elegant manner. It was too easy. Naruto laid his hands over his head as he aimlessly floated atop of the surface of the river. Its current seemed to just pull him slowly. His mind went numb as he floated with the water. Ever since he was able to utilize his senjutsu and mastering the art of the sage, his body seemed to want these small moments with the earth and his elements. It was so relaxing, so surreal, he could feel everything, anything. He felt a shift in the wind. His eyes snapped open as he felt the several chakra sources filled with malice and hate surround his position. He disappeared in a puff of smoke. Danzo watched as the blood escaped as he removed the blade from Tsunade's dying body. The several machines connected to her body stopped the rhythmic sound of beeping and turned into a fury of beeps, trying to signal the severity of her condition. Danzo just watched his plan go off without a hitch. He smiled evilly as he placed the Iwa headband across Tsunade's closed eyes. For the village, for the people, your death will mark the start of the next war and the end of Uzumaki Naruto. Where the hell is the bastard? She screamed to the heavens as she walked by the river in a quick pace. She was told that he was by the river. Gaara never told her why. She was slightly suspicious, but she just assumed otherwise. She walked by the river in an extremely upset mood. Her min. D was set on giving Naruto a heart-filled thanking, not only for fixing Gaara before, but for ultimately setting up the pieces for her family to be reunited, well, what was left of it. Now she had half the mind to seriously harm that bloody Hokage. Where the hell is H? 2 arms snaked out of the bushes near. Temari never saw it coming. One hand clamped her mouth shut, cutting off her short scream. The other wrapped around her waist, pulling her deep in the dark bushes. Kakashi sat through a small meeting with some civilians complaining about the lack of medics in certain districts of the village. He just sighed and looked at his small orange book from afar. The clouds parted as the sunlight shone over the cover of his favorite erotica book. We have more sickly and elderly than the entire north side of the village, the plump woman in the red said with a firm political voice. Our staff is too undermanned at the moment, I can't commit any medics at the moment, our medical staff is spread thin as it is. Kakashi said in a respectable pleading voice. The woman crossed her arms in a huff as her mind went over her concerns. Kakashi just sighed at the defiant nature this woman showed. Sure, he wasn't the true Hokage, but he deserved some respect from these inbreed, up-nosed citizens from the north. The north side would be very generous if there was a, she paused, sudden, increase to the medics available, the woman said with a sly smile. He shifted uncomfortably under the glare the woman in the red gave him. He wisely wished for some holy intervention, and his was given a blessing in some sort. 4 Anbu appeared, shocking the woman. The small wisps of smoke slowly faded as the men stood still, waiting for recognition. Kakashi smirked. Kakashi gave a fake sigh and pretended Oseam-ups when inside he was jumping with joy at the shot of being let loose from this clingy, annoying woman that just won't take a hint. The Sharingan holder rose to his feet and gestured to the D. As you can see, he said, hinting at the sudden emergence of the Anbu, an emergency has come up, that needs my utmost attention, he said with a cocky smile. The woman huffed, grabbed her expensive purse in her hand and moved to the door in an up-nosed fashion. Kakashi fell to his chair and gestured with as little energy spent for the Anbu to come. He took a deep breath and cursed a certain blow. NDE for leaving so much responsibility on one individual as motivated as himself. Sure, he had Yamato taking a good brunt of the work, especially with his very efficient building skills being needed in the village now. But still he was the one talking to these narrow-minded people. The Anbu stood closer to the oak desk and the mood that these soldiers were in struck him. His visible eyebrow moved in a way that described his emotional position at the time. Stressed and worry covered the third visible part of his face. The second smaller Anbu nodded, signaling a safe room. The taller Anbu spoke clearly. There has been a serious incident, he said simply. Kakashi frowned at the word incident. It could mean anything, and adding serious didn't help either. Incident, Kakashi said as he stood, reluctantly readying himself for some running. Both Anbu paused, looked at one another slightly before continuing. Assassination, sir. She pushed and pushed, she screamed, she pulled, she did everything possible. She pushed with all her might, yet the arms held her still. Hush, the deep voice said to the struggling Sunanin. She didn't listen, she struggled and pushed, she did anything that would rip these impossibly strong arms loose. Temari, be still, the voice said in a whisper. Hearing her name spoken through this voice seemed strange and yet familiar. She stopped, if only for a second, just to see what would happen. Be still, Temari, it's me, Naruto, Naruto said, shocking the Sunanin. Naruto, she said in her mind as went into shock. Why is he doing this? What is he doing? Saint, be quiet, he said as he pulled his warm hand off from her waist. His hand went through several seals. She felt her body go cold, not freezing cold, just very cool. She felt certain parts of her go numb and fuzzy. She felt her heartbeat get slower but steady. What the hell did he do? He pulled her closer as Naruto felt several presences surround him. Temari didn't know what was going on. She felt him pull her closer and she felt the warmth of his bare chest push against her back. She blushed insanely as this feeling overwhelmed her senses. His musk surrounded her, his strong stone-cut arms held her in place. His chest pushed against her back, his hand placed so delicately on her hip. All of this combined to send chills down her spine. And while all of this was happening, Naruto was none the wiser. The bushes kept his and Temari hidden. The jutsu he cast held down his large chakra signature and would also help pull her chakra down. Maybe it would be a bit too powerful for Temari, but it wouldn't harm her. He felt the presences move. He saw over 20 ninja passed by, all Anbu level or higher. They should have noticed him. Whether or not his and Temari's signature was held down, Anbu level should have noticed them. His sage powers lowered as he felt the nins leave. He released Temari as he got to his feet. Why would 20 Anbu be that reckless with their positioning and speed? Naruto pondered as he turned to the angry-looking, red-faced Temari, staring daggers at his eyes with a look certain predators possessed. What the hell was that? She said as her anger and confusion reached a boiling point. Shinobi, very strong, Naruto said as he began packing his clothes together. All the commotion had distracted Temari of a single and very important fact. Naruto was standing right in front of her. Shirtless, and soaking wet. Her angered eyes drifted downwards as Naruto tried to explain why he did what he did. I used my senses, he explained as Temari just watched how his chest moved up and down as he breathed in slowly. I felt the anger and fear in those shinobi. I couldn't attack them. I didn't know what village they were affiliated with, the way Mu. Sklees appeared and disappeared and moved so sensually as his right hand went upwards to scratch the back of his head nervously. Suddenly appearing in front of them wouldn't have helped, and then I heard your screaming, he laughed slightly. But he never saw the look of lust overcome Temari as he laughed. Her eyes watched over every inch of suntan's skin as he moved, his muscles flexed, further hyp. Noticing Temari into a lust-crazed state. Naruto continued to talk, but the cloudy look in Temari's often stern and serious eyes made him doubt she was even looking. While in Temari's mind she just ticked. Naruto had finished what he was saying, he stood up and stretched out, making Temari wonder whether or not he knew that she was, in the most basic of terms, checking him out. So should we get going? He said, looking her directly in the eye, somewhat shocking her with his calmness and that confident look about him. Ah, yay, sure, she said as he gave one final yawn. He offered a hand to the sitting Temari. She pushed his hand away with a huff as got up on her on. Naruto just gave a small chuckle at the constant defiance she always showed, even to her superiors. This way then, he said as he turned his back to her. And slowly placed his cage robes on. Temari pulled herself together as she admired even more muscles being showed to her, and it wasn't any secret that she could hide her disappointment when the damned robes blocked her view. She saw Naruto began to walk away and she rushed to meet his pace. The trip towards the inn was silent, not uncomfortable by any means, just silent. Naruto hated silence. So, you and Shika, done it yet? Naruto said with a sly wink. Death, the scent of dirt and blood filled his senses as he first entered the small tent. Kakashi looked down at the crimson-soaked body. He stole a glance at the still body, but for only a second. He had known Tsunade most of his life. He respected her as a leader, as a ninja and as a medic. He never expected to see her in a comatose state. He never expected to see her like this. Kakashi stared down at the headband, left carelessly, left as an act of war, left as a trophy of who killed whom. However, he highly doubted a nin would leave one's headband, especially one who could infiltrate Konoha's defenses and assassinate a highly guarded leaf nin. Kakashi leaned down to grab the headband. Some of the Anbu present watched as he looked deeply at the Iwa insignia. We are not sure how to access this, sir, the bare-masked Anbu said. There's only two reasons I can honestly saw. Why are the most plausible? The Anbu coughed at the firm attention he was now receiving from the temporary Hokage. A message of war. He paused as both Kakashi and the masked Anbu thought of the possibilities of war in the dark times that Konoha was suffering right now. Or another village attempting to set up Iwa. Again thoughts came to mind. No matter what, there is a village out there willing and ready to attack. Whether they wait for their village to be weakened by war or disease, or by a frontal assault from the accused. The citizen that warned us has a mouth, the Anbu continued. Citizen? Kakashi asked, confused. The Anbu made a nervous gesture as he instructed his underling to explain to the legendary Sharingan Kakashi. Well, sir, we Anbu are spread, very thin. He paused as he coughed. Intentionally, a citizen was found screaming about the victim's assassination. He finished, feeling as if that was all he needed to know. Kakashi sighed. How come we were not informed earlier? The NBU replied quickly. We Anbu are on 16-hour shifts. We had over 10 members, so we just simply waited. Kakashi pinched the bridge of his nose in frustration. Before he told us head off on the way. Half the village will know by the end of the day. Kakashi mind wondered to the outcry of the public. The villagers will demand action, and whether or not they know if it's for the best. Kakashi. I continued to pinch the bridge of his nose in worry. The death of Tsunade will cause the masses to panic for their own safety to begin with. The second the public hears about Iwa as its main suspect, not only will the villagers demand war. Chunin, Jonin and Genin will demand it as well. The Anbu looked at the Kakashi with a firm look, yet what he said wasn't so firm as he looked, somewhat concerned and doubtful as he spoke. So what should we do? Naruto and a somewhat calm Temari entered with a sigh as they finally returned to their warm and cozy inn. The blonde duo opened the door and was more than happy to see the large roaring fireplace still lit, the candles giving off a warm glow, and to Naruto the absence of one abusive waitress was making the sight an even happier one. Where TT? He hell where yo you too, the hidden Kankuro said as he jumped from his small hiding space in the corner, watching with weary, alcohol-crazed eyes that only a protective brother possessed when witnessing his sister in any boy-related issue. "What the hell, Kankuro?" Temari screamed at her smashed younger brother. What the hell, what the hell," he said looking around as if that was a stupid question. He pointed in the direction of Naruto, well somewhat close to his direction. "I thought you were with the Nara guy," he said in a drunken slur, looking Naruto up and down. "What?" Temari screamed at this common assumption. Naruto sighed as he sat to the side watching this little fiasco. He reached out for a stool to watch from a distance. "Now I see you, going out at all times of the night, and. Temari just gave a strong jab to his face. Kankuro, too drunk and unprepared, was struck right in the temple. He fell like a bag of meat. Temari left for her room, but before leaving she stole one glance of Naruto again. That fuzzy feeling she never recognized before rose in her chest as she watched Naruto laugh and help Kankuro to his feet. She turned her back, somewhat reluctantly, and left for her room. "What the hell was that F for?" Kankuro said, drunken slur still prominent in his voice. "I don't know," Naruto said, not so honestly. "Girls Naruto laughed as he draped his loose arm around his shoulder and helped lean his body against his. "Which way to your room?" Naruto asked politely as Kankuro pointed lazily towards his room. I want no funny business, none at all." "None," Kankuro said as his eyes slowly closed. "I want one kid named after me, and my own sake bar," Kankuro said as he made a list of demands as Naruto helped him to his room. "That seems a bit extreme," Naruto said with a smile, going along with the drunken ramblings of a friend. "Kankuro Uzumaki just doesn't sound right to me," Naruto said, laughing at how these Suna nins couldn't handle their alcohol. "Okay, then. Some money and a nicer sister, a gentle one, that D doesn't hit," Kankuro said counting off each demand with a finger. They entered the room and Naruto lied down Kankuro, and closed the door quickly leaving the ramblings of a drunken man to himself. Naruto looked around. The wooden hallway was covered in darkness, the small slivers of light was all that could be seen as Naruto slowly crept to his room, trying his best not to wake anyone up, in particular Temari. Why, well that went without saying. Shikamaru, well he strikes Naruto as an early morning crank. Naruto searched for his room, decided that he was naturally lucky, so he just took a roll of the dice and chose the door nearest to him. "I want all Anbu teams on high alert, constant patrols on the village border. No one gets in or out." The Anbu captain saluted and left in the ninja way. "Genin teams are to be disbanded. We cannot risk our youth, especially at a time like this," Kakashi spoke as Iruka nodded and left. "All missions over the rank of B will go as long as planned. All lower rank missions are cancelled as of now." Several nin nodded and left in a puff of smoke. "And can Sam E1 get me?" Kakashi thought of the most appropriate team, Kurenai's team. He said as he accessed that Kurenai's leadership, Shino's newly made Jonin ranked team could use some more experience. The packed room was soon empty. Kakashi gave a good yawn and turned his back to the piles of paperwork and opened a small familiar orange book. He felt he deserved it at times like this. The temporary SSI stand entered with a ton of paperwork down to her upper arms. Shizune had taken the assassination rather hard. Kakashi has sent her home for the time being, that is until Naruto came back. He understood that Naruto would be the only person that really could understand the troubles that harmed her. He did wish her the best, it was simply a matter of privacy. He never really knew Tsunade outside of the professional world. And to an even lesser extent Shizune. He would miss Tsunade, he would be sad, but he wouldn't mourn her death. That would be an insult to the persons who truly knew her. "Jiraiya, Shizune and Naruto. Got another bunch for you," she said wiping her brow, slightly amazed at the weight of the paper. Sigh, Kakashi thought as he placed the orange book in his jacket. Temari into her room with a small smile on her face. She looked at the room, a small scarlet rug, a rather large vanity mirror and desk, and to top it off a large bed. She closed the door behind her, foolishly forgetting to lock the door, simply relying on her keen ninja skills to alert her. As she slipped off her clothing, sticky with sweat and dirt, her hand brushed against the bare, tanned skin that Naruto unintentionally held. The skin his rough hands brushed past as to hold her down. A prickling feeling overcame her. She felt sensitive as her hand lightly went over the skin. The more she thought of it, The more it made her angry. What did he do? Did he do something to her? She gave out a small growl, not caring if she woke up any of her fellow group members. What the hell did he do to me? She screamed inside as she angrily reached for her brush as she pulled apart her ponytails and started to roughly go through her hair. The small feeling soon left as she gave in a sigh of relief. Her body was just in this strange place right now she accessed. She heard some rumbling and movement in the hallway behind her. She didn't feel any over or underuse of chakra signatures, nothing filled with malice. And nothing overly hidden enough to be considered a threat. She went through her hair with a silence that she seemed uncomfortable with as her skin started to creep with the memory of Naruto's touch. She gave another small growl as she slammed her brush down. She left for her bed, hopeful for this strange feeling to simply leave her. Naruto entered as he laid down his head, angry Suna women. Drunken overprotective brothers, and to top it off an overdramatic friend. He relaxed under the dirty sheets of the inn and fell to a dreamless sleep. Danzo played over and over. The scenarios as of which the temporary cage would go through. Lockdown, Anbu teams, sending certain teams, etc., etc. So far, Kakashi was following it to the printed letter. Danzo tapped his hands off. TLY as his mind went over the next step that would ultimately lead to himself as the rightful Hokage, and Naruto, bowing down to his feet, following his every order, whether it be out of service to rightful Hokage or out of pure force itself, Danzo did not care. A smile would be expected now, wouldn't it? His mission accomplished, another step taken for the better of this great village, so a smile was soon to be cracking over his usually frowning lips. No, he had a liking to the slug princess. She may have learned the wrong ways from her delusional sensei and his former rival Sarutobi, but her mind was always for the better of the village. Even after her defection, Danzo understood, if only slightly, he never had any sort of precious one to with. No, he had the protection of the village to be concerned with. Sure, he was disappointed with the defection. He had several contacts and at times a rude member watching her at certain times, not to protect her, that was silly, just to make sure she never strayed to the other side. And the second she did return he celebrated silently, Danzo knowing the medical bay needed more attention than it deserved, a strong familiar leader at a time of turmoil. She was needed at the time more than him. But times have changed, the other villages are changing for the worse, Suna is regaining strength, the Mizukage is calming down the civil war and Danzo knew the true nature of man. Another scapegoat would be needed, and a weakened Konoha will be a holy target of target. Iwa and Kumo are becoming more unpredictable than ever and to top it off the emergence of Akatsuki has made matters complicated. But Danzo's carefully made plan is coming into place. The death of Tsunade will rock the civilian core, urging the village to declare war on Iwa. Of course Kakashi, let alone Naruto, won't start a war over a leftover Iwa band, but the plan was not for the village to declare war. At least, not yet. No, this was a mission of casting suspicion, making Naruto, or to the lesser extent, the village, hesitant to suddenly join forces with a village that had suddenly killed a beloved leader. Naruto would never accuse Suna, the council and educated nin would point fingers at Suna. But Naruto would protect Suna to the fullest extent, and unfortunately the village would be behind their hero and leader. But Iwa was another story. Naruto's bloodline was a shock to all. Excluding himself of course, Iwa was the natural enemy of the Namikaze family. Sooner or later the village hidden in the rocks would demand Naruto's head, the village would protect its leader and hero with everything it has. Step by step, this was only part of Danzo's complicated plan. But it was for the better of the village. And the village needed Danzo. Whether they believe against it or not, the death of Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze will happen. It is for the village. Gaara and Naruto lead their parties to the neutral ground with no words spoken for a while. The day was covered with ugly gray clouds, making this day seem very, very dreadful to Naruto. Naruto and Gaara walked side by side, neither saying a word. Temari and Shikamaru stood side by side, neither really acknowledging the other. Each just following Shikamaru's strategic positioning. Gaara and Naruto in the second to front, having the most protection, which to most seems stupid with Naruto's godlike senses and Gaara's protective sand. Temari was in the front and Shikamaru behind the two cages, easier for Shikamaru to order the others. Temari had better access to her fan for a frontal attack, and was there to protect Naruto and Gaara. Kankuro was behind Shikamaru, his hands holding onto his chakra strings ready for any sudden attack. And finally Neji was behind Kankuro by the several meters, his Byakugan activated. His 360-degree vision would warn any of us about any enemy from behind and from the wings. Shikamaru was very happy with how he set up this team, his pride shrunk as his Adon. Tion focused on a particularly interesting shaped cloud. Kankuro watched Naruto with suspicious eyes. He had always been the protective brother, he couldn't help it, it was simply his nature, he knew that Gaara would hand over Temari on a silver platter if Naruto showed any interest in her. He always suspected something when Temari was suddenly assigned the long-term mission of being the diplomatic representative of Suna in Konoha. She was far more valuable at Suna. The thought of Gaara scheming against his efforts made Kankuro's blood boil. He was the only thing protecting her honor these days. Naruto walked with the quick pace that Temari placed. He frowned with being surrounded by his bodyguards. I mean, sure, they are bodyguards, but he was pretty sure he could handle himself against some Rouge Nin. He sighed as he placed his hands behind his head, relaxing his somewhat numb arms. Tired from swinging aimlessly, he looked around at his surroundings, trees at all sides, shades of green and brown. His mind relaxed as the trees swung with the wind. Being a sage like him, seeing that was a beautiful sight itself. Naruto sighed in relaxation, annoying most by his somewhat nonchalant behavior at a time when attacks could happen at any time. Naruto just laughed as he watched everyone turn to face him with some sort of look about their face. He just brushed it off as he continued walking, watching the trees sway with the wind. Temari turned away from trying to stare angrily at Naruto, but for all she could muster, the mere glance he returned made her feel funny. She never felt this feeling. She looked ahead, trying to distract herself with strategies of defensive. She knew her mission was to protect Gaara, and to a lesser extent, a shiver ran up her spine, Naruto, from enemy shinobi. But she would most likely get in the way of both Gaara and Naruto intended target. Neji's all-seeing eyes watched for a distance, but movement caught his eye. It was fast, extremely so. But this is what he was brought here for, to identify possible enemies from distances. Hokage sir, unknown chakra sources, due west-north, 1 kilometer, closing on our position, Neji yelled to his superior. The group paused and stood their ground. Shikamaru and Temari's mind went over the variables and strategies they had said earlier. Kankuro hid his puppet under a small genjutsu and readied himself for a possible battle. Gaara removed his gorge from his back, placed it to the side as he held it in place with one hand. Naruto smiled as he placed the Hokage hat on, happy with his pick of the Hyuga genius. His skills were in full display today as he watched the Hyuga announce the position to everyone, how far they were, and Shikamaru announced it was only a few seconds or so before the sources of the suspicious chakra revealed themselves to the group. 500 meters and counting, Neji shouted for all to hear. Naruto rolled his shoulders as he made sure not to activate his sage abilities at the moment. This situation didn't really strike Naruto as a time to bring out the big guns. Naruto felt the chakra. The change in air signaled their arrival. They did not know that we knew they had arrived. None in the group moved in a way that could be identified as intimidation to the new arrivals. Naruto felt curious with these chakra sources, not the group but there was a one chakra that interested him especially so. Naruto walked out of position. Shikamaru caught himself before he yelled angrily at Naruto. He had been so used to being in charge of Naruto in the few times they had missions together. He watched Naruto approach the direction of the shinobi. "Hello," Naruto shouted, causing most of the group to look angrily, again, at Naruto. There was a rustle in the bushes. The forest stood still. Unnaturally so, they were discussing something between themselves, most likely if it was wise to reveal themselves. Temari watched carefully as that idiot approached the unknown shinobi. Suddenly 3 shinobi emerged. Temari held out her fan in a defensive position. She looked to the side and saw her siblings following suit. She looked at the 3 closely. One was hardly over the age of 15. The shark-like teeth caught her attention immediately, second only to the large swords held over his back, wrapped and held together in bandages. Kiri forehead protector spread across his chest. Black-rimmed, strange-looking glasses worn over his eyes, watching everyone with suspicious eyes. The other was the tallest of the group, seemed to Temari as a middle-aged man. A large black eye patch hiding his right eye. He had fair skin, a decent-looking man. He wore a talisman in each ear which seemed strange to Temari. He was staring at all of her allies. Naruto was being watched with a strange seriousness from the man, but as Temari watched for a short moment, his eyes seemed to GY as it passed the Hyuga boy Naruto had defeated during the Chunin exams. But the third emerged from bushes. She was around Temari's age, perhaps older, red hair reaching to her knees, covering her right eye. Her eyes passed Gaara slowly and with a look that Temari couldn't point down and identify. She had a slender and curvy body, her eyes were a shade of light green, she wore a blue dress that she quietly admired, her long red hair was weaving in and out as she approached Naruto. Watching Gaara with a glint in her eye, "I am the Godime Mizukage," she said as she bowed slightly. "It is an honor to meet the Rokudime Hokage and Godime Kazekage for the very first time." Naruto and Gaara returned the bow with their own. Naruto removed his Hokage hat, shook his head with a smile that it hadn't resorted to violence. He had to pause for a split second. Veer thought that his mindset would turn from the boy that usually initiated the fighting to the peacekeeping old man that he felt he had turned to. The Mizukage eyes were glued firmly on the Kazekage, but the second the Hokage removed his hat, Mei Terumi's eyes sparkled as she admired his good looks. He approached her with a smile and offering a hand. She smiled in return and shook his hand. His FIRM handshake made her smile intensify. "Hokage, so young," she smelled the air, filled with his must and oh so large chakra source, so strong. She watched how he blushed at the attention he was receiving from the Mizukage. "So handsome," she said as she held his hand a bit longer than Naruto expected. She closed in on Naruto, her other hand reached for the hand that she held firmly as her free H. And started to softly travel up his muscle-clad arm, her green eyes staring softly as she continued. Mizukage-sama, this is most inappropriate," Chojuro spoke with a firm blush, watching his long crush openly. Attack, another man right in front of him. He was speechless as the fifth just brushed him off. "Young and strong," she said with a smile, her eyes filled with lust and want. "Ah, yay, thanks," Naruto said, scratching the back his head awkwardly. I am Mizukage. "Mei," she said, cutting him off, eyelashes battering with a fury. "Mei, would you be kind enough as to let my arm free," he said, nervous. Not of fear, more of this aggressive mode that she had. The group had decided earlier to walking together, who was confident enough to face 9 Jonin, 3 cages and Wo demon holders was worth facing as a group. The group had abandoned the Nara's strategic positioning as he didn't know enough of the others to trust them. Of course Shikamaru stood at the front as the lead, and Neji at the rear. The Mizukage's light green eyes sparkled as he spoke carefully. Temari watched from behind, dark green eyes staring daggers at the back of this newcomer, the one latched firmly to Naruto's right arm. "As you wish," she paused, hinting for his name. "Naruto," he spoke carefully, almost expecting something to happen. The Mizukage's eyes sparkled in recognition. "Ah, the famous Naruto of Konoha. Son of the great Yondaime, holder of the even greater nine-tailed demon, taught by the finest teachers available, Sharingan Kakashi and the great toad Sannin Jiraiya, victor in the great battle against pain, even defeating the Kazekage in his demon form while a genin," she smiled almost evilly. "You know Naruto-kun," Temari gave in an inwards gasp as Mei's hand touched and groped his chest. Adding the Mizukage calling Naruto, "Naruto-kun. My advisors have told me that I should stay on your good side." She smiled as she watched how his warmth never seemed to fade as she openly groped his chest. "If I had ever known you were this good-looking," she said, smile reaching as far as it could. "Now I can see it will be easier than ever to get on your." She paused as she pushed Hi's forearm firmly against her breasts. "Good side." Kankuro landed face first in the ground in exactly 1 second later for no apparent reason, plus a large nosebleed. With the Mizukage joining the group, all to the displeasure of Temari for some reason, the group arrived at sunset to the neutral ground. The grounds were covered knee-deep in snow, the snowflakes drifted aimlessly in the breeze as the cold air chilled 3 Suna nins especially. The groups had made their way to the embassy, but have been told that it had been extended for the tomorrow afternoon. Shikamaru sighed in annoyance, Gaara as well, but they overcame it. The 3 cages had made their way to the closest inn or tavern or whatever. As long as they were out of this cold all the better, Mei and Temari voiced as the men just followed their dominate lead. The inside of the inn was very lavish and to Naruto's taste a bit too fancy. This was matched by Gaara's Spartan view on life and Shikamaru's laziness to have anything more than what's needed. The place was made of pure wood, with touches of steel in all the needed places. Extravagant rugs were laid across the floors, expensive paintings and tapestries were displayed across the walls. This was definitely not Naruto's type of place to be comfortable in. All his life he was never given anything. Naruto's early childhood was blurry at best, he had distant memories, which in his opinion, he would rather forget. Crying was now in the past, pulling and pushing for attention, begging and pleading. Never again, he vowed to himself. He took a seat in the closest empty table, nearest to the burning fireplace that seemed to be the only source of heat in this cold and expensive inn. Shikamaru took the seat closest to the fire. Kankuro left sightseeing, Naruto presumed. Gaara left for his assigned room as the two that was with the Mizukage began bickering with one another. Mei quickly took the seat to his side. Temari was beaten by a split second. She eyeballed the Mizukage and took the chair opposite to Naruto. Mei waved for a waitress. An elderly woman approached with a smile. "How may I help you, honorable guests?" she said with a respectful bow. Naruto looked away as Temari and Mei smiled at the polite nature of the woman. "Some glasses and a bottle of sake for my friend," she said, gesturing to Naruto with a smile. "Right away, honorable guests," she bowed, slowly walking away. "So I have heard so much about you, the great Naruto of Konoha, yet I barely know you." She paused, looking suspiciously at Temari for a split second. "What would you like to know about me?" Naruto answered back politely. "Here's a good one. What is your chakra affinity?" she asked, preparing herself to impress her new target. "My affinity is wind style," Naruto said quickly. "Wind style?" Temari said, quite shocked, never expecting Naruto of all people to share her affinity and her well-known passion. "And yours I guess is wind as well," Naruto said with a smile at T. He somewhat shocked look on Temari's face. "Yes, I had it discovered during my academy years," Temari said, proud with her affinity. "Yes, well, that's all and good, but wait, excuse me," Naruto said, cutting Mei off. "Did you say you had your affinity revealed during your academy years?" Naruto said, surprised and quite angry at the discovery. "Yes, it was mandatory for all students, wasn't it mandatory or your teaching staff as well?" Temari said, perplexed at the reaction. "No, it was not," he said, quite angry at his teachings, somewhat angry at the underappreciation that the Konoha teaching system had received for the last few decades. His mind went to the possibilities of him learning his affinity during his academy days. He could have been a prodigy like Sasuke. "When did you discover your affinity?" Mei asked, quite peeved at the turn of the subject. "A few months ago," Naruto said simply, as if it was nothing, thinking more on making some big changes to the Ninja Academy system. "Excuse me," both Mei and Temari said at the same time. "What level are you on? He mustn't be too high, could he?" Mei and Temari said, one after the other. "I've recently mastered cutting a waterfall with pure wind chakra." "Ah, yay," he said, surprised at the look Temari had given him. "All right," how Abaid, smiling in a dreamy state while her eyes landed back on Naruto, "you look a lot like him, you know." "Nah." Naruto thought more on the subject of his father, but that was for another time. "Never met him, never cared for him," he said in a cold tone. A lie true, but this was a matter for another day. The tone caught Mei off guard. "Ai, your mother. I have heard so much Minato, yet nothing of the one who stole him away from the general female public," she said, trying to understand Naruto a bit more, whom she found more and more interesting. "Never heard of her. Maybe I share her last name, or it's just another name given out to the orphans," he said simply. "Then who looked after you when you were young?" Temari asked. "Ah, I lived in an orphanage when I was," he paused, thinking back all those years ago, about 7. The two girls said together. "Ah, yay, lived in an apartment by myself for most of my life," he said, causally giving up being interested in these various facial expressions these two young girls gave him. "And now you're the sole owner of the famed Namikaze mansion," Mei pointed out. Naruto gave a small chuckle to that notion. He had heard of the Namikaze mansion, who hadn't really? The place was known for its beauty and security. Naruto had many attempts to seeing the insides of the mansion. He had tried many times to join the tours that went through the walls of the famed mansion. Unfortunately, he wasn't so lucky. He was just recently pointed out he owns it. Naruto mentally cringed at the thought of joining a place that in his mind represents a place that he was rightfully allowed to join, yet he was denied access. The place was destroyed though, no point anyway. Unfortunately, the mansion was destroyed along with the village during the invasion, Naruto said. "Is that all you need to know of my depressing story?" Naruto said playfully, when inside, rehearsing his lifetimes was an exhausting experience by itself. Naruto doubted his ability to go through so much grief again. How about your teachers? Temari asked. We all hear the stories of Sharingan Kakashi. And the great Jiraiya. Naruto gave another laugh as she gave the description of the great Jiraiya and Kakashi. Trust me, he said in between small giggles. Two women like you, he said pausing, looking closely at the duo, wouldn't enjoy the company of the great Kakashi and Jiraiya, he said emphasizing the word great in reference to his senseis. Oh, and why is that? Mei said simply with a small smirk. Jiraiya's perversion was well known to all. Naruto's eyes looked curiously at the smirk that the Mizukage sported. Temari frowned, not sure what was going on at the moment. The elderly lady returned with a small and a silver tray. Holding perfectly the several cups and bottles of designer sake, she carefully placed them at near the honorable guests and left bowing. With the silver platter at her side, Naruto thanked her as she left. And why is it that we wouldn't enjoy the company of such renowned shinobi? The Mizukage said, holding her cup filled to the end with sake. Naruto took the bait, looked directly at Mei's eyes and said simply and casually, because two strong and beautiful women such as yourself would easily be offended with their openly perverse nature, he said with a smile. Seeing the reactions the two girls displayed, the casual display that Naruto had been displaying to these ladies, never, ever gave them the thought that he had any interest, at least on a physical level. Even the Mizukage was somewhat puzzled by the uninterested Hokage. She put on her best moves, damn it. Now both women know that he saw them as beautiful and strong. Naruto would look back on this day and laugh. This is when it all began. Both Temari and Mei gulped down some sake as Naruto took a small sip from his glass. I think it's time for me to retire to my room, Naruto said, slowly finishing his cup. And what will it take for me to join you? Mei said in a seductive manner, latching onto his free arm, bringing her nose closer to the source of musk her body somehow needed to inhale once more. Naruto smiled kindly to his fellow Kage. Mizukage, Mei, she said with a small playful frown. Mei, Naruto said, correcting himself. He was about to continue, but was at loss for words. How could he deny the Mizukage? How about this? He said, formulating a plan in that unpredictable head. He grabbed her hand softly. Mei smiled at the soft contact. After the summit meeting, he said, still unsure if this was all worth it. If you behave, he said, emphasizing the word strongly, I'll take you out on a date, my treat, Naruto said with a smile. Temari's eyes widened at the proposal. She grabbed the bottle and messily threw down some more liquid into her glass. For some reason she was upset with this proposal, she wasn't sure why though. Deal, she said, offering her hand to seal the deal. Naruto sighed as he softly shook her hand. Deal. Mei bounced happily to her room. She skipped past the several doors. One sounded like it was filled with Ao and Chojuro bickering. She opened the door to see the two arguing as usual. She entered with a skip in her step. Ao, somewhat curious with this mood, asked. So what has gotten you into such a mood? He asked with a smile, genuinely happy for her. I have a date with the Hokage, she said in a sing-song voice. A date? Chojuro shouted as he stood unintentionally. He blushed like a tomato and sat back down, playing with his index fingers shyly. Mizukage-sama, I am highly against this, Ao said with a disapproval tone. And I care how, she said in a rebellious teenage voice. As your high advisor, your close bodyguard, as a person that holds common sense. I beg of you, please reconsider, Ao begged, but sighed at the faraway look in his master and chief's eyes. I will consider what you said, Ao, she said in a dismissive tone as she hoped to her room, muttering to herself what to wear for her soon-to-becoming date with the blonde demon holder. Temari threw herself to the plush mattress. An upset frown marked her face as she angrily rethought seeing Naruto offer a date. To her of all people. What was it that he saw in her anyway? Sure, she was good-looking and all that, but, wait. Why does she even care? She doesn't care. Yeah, that's it, she doesn't care. What Naruto does and who he does is his business and his business only. She laid on her side as she put out the only light in her large room. She quickly shut her eyes and tried to go to sleep. Her mind saw an image of the Mizukage, grouping and cuddling that warm body that contained that odor that seemed as simply irresistible. She growled to herself as she sat up and fluffed her pillow rather roughly. What's the matter with me? She growled as she threw the pillow down. She closed her eyes once more, the image of herself replacing Mei's form, herself holding her form against Naruto's. Her lips claiming his hands holding her, rubbing her, holding her. His eyes, those blue eyes, deep and emotion-filled, electrifying her senses, staring directly at her, her body melted. Her muscles relaxed, she breathed out a sigh of relaxation. His and her legs tangled and woven together in a loving manner, the image sent shivers down her spine. She woke, her eyes snapped open in a hurry. She felt a small bead of sweat roll down her neck softly. She wiped it quickly as the thought came quickly to her, the name that would remain there for a while. She said it simply and quickly. Do I kinda like Naruto? Mai Terumi went to bed with the thoughts of politics and homeland far from her mind. Naruto Uzumaki, or is it Naruto Namikaze, she didn't care really. Although Uzumaki sounded better with her name, Mai Uzumaki, Mai Namikaze, they both sounded so good. She gave out a small girly squeal, hugging her pillow with cage strength. Naruto, he was an enigma, he confused her. He was young, much younger than herself, that really didn't bother her, if anything that made him more appealing to her, a young teen lusting over herself brought herself to a confidence she hasn't been on for quite some time. But the Mattoon strange with the happy demeanor and youthful light he held, he had a realistic outlook on his life and his peers, he showed some strong leadership at times. So many qualities that appealed to her, he just seemed perfect. And most of all, he was strong, nice and handsome. What more could she want? Hell, he was most likely twice as strong as her, and she was pretty tough. The air was heavily filled with his intimidating chakra source. She remembered hearing of Kumo nin stimulating and attempting to make their chakra seem larger and more intimidating. Naruto didn't do this, she was sure. He also seemed pretty honorable, even for a shinobi of Konoha. She offered herself pretty openly, and throughout her years she had a basic grip on the fairer sex. Naruto said no. More than once actually, quite shocking, well, not shocking, but surprising to her. So all in all, he was the perfect man for her, and she is going for him whether he wanted to or not. The next day started with a fresh snowy breeze, the clouds parted and the sunlight emerged over the busy merchant-run city. The cages of each village returned on time to the city center. The room was the true meaning of neutral ground. The color of the walls were a boring white and the carpets were an ugly, dirt brown. The circular table was large and covered most of the room, leaving small space for the very tall seats, all 5 separated into even spaces, each holding the insignia of their village in a high banner behind their seat. Each cage sat down in the same consecutive time, their cage hats hiding their faces from one another. The elderly man in the middle, with dark skin and a bandaged head, long hair reaching his upper back, spoke with a clear political voice, filled with experience and wisdom. Place your hats on the table. He paused as he looked the Mizukage first at the far left of him. She nodded and placed it on the table. Mifune thought of the Mizukage as a breath of fresh air. He has seen the work that the previous Mizukages had done and it led to ruin. His mind saw the corruption spreading faster than he comprehended, and he was right. Luckily war never spread to the other countries, and more luckily the war never affected his precious land. He was determined to see his land as a peaceful center of intelligence and common sense, not that of barbaric wars and ignorance. He looked at the cage next. He nodded and placed his hat in front of him, leaning forward with his fingers folded into each other. He enjoyed the company of the young cage. He was one of the more intelligent persons he had the pleasure to meet. He seemed like a solid leader with great powers in controlling sand. He seemed like he knew what he was doing. He was young, but he was mature, and that's the only reason to really worry about youth and its foolishness. Mifune looked at the next cage, Onoki the Sandame Tsuchikage. He was the oldest of all cages, stubborn as a rock, very cunning, and his age severed him right throughout these long years. Mifune looked at the next man, the Yondaime Raikage of Kumo, named simply A. He placed his hat disrespectfully quickly downwards. Obviously upset with the pace the meeting was set in. Mifune never liked him. His emotions carried too much hold on his mind. He never thought through things the full way. He was a powerful cage, perhaps the strongest of his villages, but he was too hot-headed. He and that brother of his were really the forms of chaos together. And then he looked at the youngest cage in the room. Naruto placed his hat before himself, not smiling or showing any sort of movement that would be taken to offense of his fellow cages. His eyes shifted to the man in the middle of the half-circle. Naruto Uzumaki, or was it Namikaze? He was the strongest of the 5, not the smartest as the cage or ambitious as the Mizukage, nor was he as experienced as the Tsuchikage, but being strong by itself brought a man respect from his fellow peers. Not Mifune though, he had more to prove to the general of the Land of Iron. Naruto was the youngest and strongest, a dangerous trait to possess. He had never met him earlier, so this man was new to him. He knew not his political sightings, whether he was a war-crazed maniac or a simple peace-loving man like himself. Mifune did look up his records earlier. Last in his graduating class, taught by Hitaki Kakashi and Jiraiya of the Sannin, he had faced a young Kazekage in battle and won, taught several jutsus, considered a prodigy by those from other villages. Strangely not that of his own village, defeated the Akatsuki leader, and elected temporary Hokage. He was by all means a prodigy, but this was a subject for another time. Here today because the Raikage has called this meeting together. Mifune paused as he saw everyone sigh in boredom. This meeting will begin now, he said, watching the interest of the cages dip. My aim is Mifune, he said, announcing his name for the cages to know, and I will this meeting's director, he said, also announcing his position to the people present. The meeting begins now. Gaara sighed at the silence. All this for it to begin in silence. Sigh, he would be the one to begin this meeting. I'll go first, Gaara announced. Listen up, he began before the Tsuchikage cut in. The makeup of the 5 cages sure has changed. You must be something special to be made Kazekage at your age, the Tsuchikage said in a snaring voice. Your father must have taught you right, he continued, but apparently he forgot to instill in you any manners, he said rather happily to point out the young boy's rudeness. Gaara was struck. He never expected an argument to implode so quickly. Behind the background, Temari and Kankuro flinched at the sudden attack on their sibling. Who does that Tsuchikage think he is? Kankuro whispered to his sister, who simply told him to shut it. Naruto, rather insulted at the insult thrown at Gaara, replied for his fellow Kage. Are you sure you're the person to be correcting others in manners, Tsuchikage? Naruto said very sharply at the elder. Ah yes, Minato's boy, I've got my eye on you, young one, he said with a glare. Naruto returned the glare. Is that a threat? He replied. Tsuchikage, na Hokage, please stop interrupting, she said, easing the tensions between the two. Kazekage, please continue, she said with a sigh in relief. I'm a former host, Gaara said with his usual casual voice. Each cage did not move in any way that might be seen as shock or surprise. Akatsuki captured me and nearly killed me by extracting the beast, he said, continuing his monotone voice. That's why I believe Akatsuki is extremely dangerous, Gaara said in a rather sad voice, even for him. I requested aid from the other cages many times, but they all ignored me, except the former Hokage, Gaara said, stating the news. Several of the cages sighed in frustration, some hifted uncomfortably at the news of their ignorance. Though at this point, with so many hosts captured, it's too late for aid, he said simply, enjoying the looks of anguish from the other cages. The tease. Uchikage snorted in disagreement. If a country has had its host captured, it has no business giving other countries orders, Onoki shouted to his fellow cage. You should have tried to recover it in secret, he continued to shout. Once it's stolen, you can't expect other countries to help you, he said simply, looking behind his shoulders at his guards, who simply nodded at his wise words. Appearance, honor, I don't have time for your outdated way of thinking, Gaara said simply, enjoying seeing the Tsuchikage grinding his teeth at his remark about his age. The Mizukage coughed for their attention. She was well read about the subject of demons and their holders. Just because the beasts have been stolen is no reason to be afraid. Naruto looked closer at the Mizukage. She shuddered for a split second and returned to form. The Tsuchikage looked down and smiled. He looked up and said, the hosts must grow with the beasts in order to adapt to them, he said, continuing to look at the Kazekage. Even then control is difficult, Kazekage, he said with a smirk. Gaara just stared back at the grinning Tsuchikage, not saying a word. Just seeing that smirk made his blood boil. He definitely didn't enjoy this elderly man. Naruto looked at the Tsuchikage with fury running in his blood. This elderly man was pushing him more so than he should ever push him. Suddenly Naruto saw its slow motion. Raikage large fist. He brought it up high and went down with speeds found only among cages. The bodyguards moved with efficiency. Naruto had told his team to hold still if a situation like this came, so Shikamaru lazed back on his side, continuing his nap, Neji watching the whole scene unfold with careful eyes. Quit your yapping, he shouted, his arm, elbow deep in the ground. Shards of table shattered and moved around the room. The Raikage's bodyguards moved to protect their unstable leader. All the guards moved into exotic stances, with exotic weapons to match. Naruto watched with a frown. Not feeling threatened, just curious with the way this Raikage was acting and why. Stand down, Temari, Kankuro, they both huffed in frustration and returned to their seats. Ow, Chojuro, it's alright, she said with her familiar smile planted on her face. Chojuro blushed and returned to his seat. Ow complained. But followed orders. The Tsuchikage gestured for his guards to leave and they followed their order. Raikage huffed and breathed in a deep breath to calm himself. He nodded and his guards sheathed their weapons and left for their seats. The Tsuchikage saw the alertness of the Hokage's guards. He planned to call him out on it. Very skilled men you have there, Hokage, he said with a smirk. As quick as a glacier, one might say, he said with a small laugh. Skilled? Why yes they are. As powerful as yours? Maybe not, Naruto said, but loyal, very. They are simply following orders, Naruto said, looking disrespectfully at the Tsuchikage's eyes. And what orders might that be? Not get kill. Ed by my far more superior Iwa shinobi, the Tsuchikage said quite smugly. No, Naruto replied. Then what? The Tsuchikage said. To stay out of my way, Naruto said casually. Tsuchikage wouldn't fall for this though. Shut it, the Raikage shouted once more. Konoha, Iwa, Suna and Kiri, he shouted the 4 villages to the cages. Akatsuki is made up of missing nin from your villages, he said, pointing the finger at the other 4. Somehow blaming it on the others. And that's not all, he began by pointing a finger at the Tsuchikage. I know there are those among you, including former cages, who have used Akatsuki for their own purposes, he said, glaring daggers at his elder cage. Used Akatsuki, Gaara and Naruto said. I don't trust you, he said, continuing to point the finger at the old cage. I had no intention of speaking with you, he said, lowering his accusing finger. I called you all here to know where your loyalties lie, he said, looking at the remaining 3 cages. Before the Raikage's question could be answered, Naruto interrupted him. What do you mean, used Akatsuki? Gaara asked, curious with what the Raikage was saying earlier. You're the cage, hasn't anyone told you anything? The Raikage said with that familiar hand again raised and accusing another person again. Go ask your elders, he said in a somewhat dismissive tone. You used Akatsuki in your own war, said angrily at the Tsuchikage. The Tsuchikage sighed, ultimately deciding that coming to these meetings was just a pain in his ass. He started from the beginning, it was easier that way. The great Count R.I.E.s are enjoying a time of relative peace, they are moving from military expansion to disarmament, he said, ending with a sigh. As tensions ease between villages, the threat of war grows smaller. And smaller, he said with a voice that had a small sliver of regret or sadness at his statement. Military villages are a drain on a country's resources, he said simply, which everyone agreed. Shinobi villages cost money. That's as basic as it gets. But there is a risk, he spoke suddenly with a grave voice. What if a war suddenly breaks out? They can't rely on untested shinobi in the heat of battle, he said in his loud, bashful voice. They'd lose the war. And Gaara worked it out instantly. He spoke, so one way of dealing with that was to use a mercenary force. He paused, like Akatsuki, he said as the realization dawned on his fellow cages. It would take time and money for a village to build such a force themselves. But Akatsuki were professionals, and they could be hired for relatively little, the Tsuchikage explained. Furthermore, they always had good results, Onoki reasoned. Tired of hearing an old man bickering, I don't want to hear it, Tsuchikage. Onoki simply snorted at the direction of the rude Raikage. Suna used Akatsuki to try and destroy Konoha, the Raikage reasoned. Naruto just frowned at the memory of the Suna invasion. Knowing the old man died for his village was a happy thought for Naruto. Knowing that the old man went out how he wanted to, but Naruto would never forgive Orochimaru, and now Akatsuki was on his list. And both the Kazekage and Hokage ended up dying, the Raikage explained. And I just can't help but think that it was a part of someone's plan, the Raikage said, staring daggers at Naruto. His eyes stared deeply at the blonde Hokage, unmoving, unwavering. He then turned to the remaining cage. Mei readied herself, she had inherited the problems of her predecessors. And Kurigakure, you are the most suspicious, he said, accusing the Mizukage of wrongdoings. The Raikage felt a small killer intent directed from the smallest of the guards. What did the Mizukage call him? Chojuro, brave bastard. You had no diplomatic relations with other countries, and there are rumors that Akatsuki was formed in Kiri, he said with a frown. The Mizukage looked down in sorrow, he face covered more so by her troublesome hair. she remained speechless. The silence disturbed Naruto. He had never seen this side to her. She began. Regret filled her voice. Now Naruto was interested. He sat up and leaned forward slightly. To tell you the truth, she began, looking at Naruto for a split second before beginning once again. There were suspicions that my predecessor, the Yondaime Mizukage, was being controlled by someone, she said with a wavering voice. Her eyesight kept returning to Naruto, seeing how he would react, badly or not. It could have been Akatsuki, she said honestly, unsure of herself, but I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, she said with a smile, which the Raikage found quite infuriating. You all, he said, anger seeping from himself. Watch your tongue, the Tsuchikage piped at the younger Kage. It's because you were continuing to amass power and techniques during the time of disarmament that the other countries were forced to hire Akatsuki in the first place, the Tsuchikage yelled the loudest Naruto had ever heard him yell. What? The Raikage replied almost in shock, his veins filled with anger. Did this man dare accuse A for the kidnapping of his brother? Before you two get into another talk and break another innocent table, there's something you all should know, Naruto said quietly with this stored info that he held since his employment in the Hokage position. What is it? The Raikage shouted, releasing his anger into the direction of Naruto, who was anything but intimidated by that show of anger. Akatsuki's leader is almost certainly Madara Uchiha, Naruto said with a sigh. The shocked looks on the faces of his fellow Kages were well deserved. They were talking about a man that has been dead, and this was more than a man, this was a shinobi legend. I thought he was long dead, the Ikage said in the most receptacle tone he has ever addressed Naruto in today, probably through shock. I don't understand it as well, but my sources said they are certain, Naruto said simply. Gaara was concerned, and these sources are? He said curious. Let me just say that Jiraiya's spy system is not dead, Naruto said with a small smirk directed at Gaara. While all the other Kages, even the Mizukage WASWS, Jiraiya's spy network was the stuff of legends. If it is still running, security measures must be taken. Mifune sat by enough. He raised his hand for silence, which gradually came. Hisu, Ged before he began, is a neutral country. I have to say, the leader of Akatsuki has read the signs of the times. He paused thinking before speaking. He used the stability and the suspicion of the their countries to increase his own powers. At this rate even land of iron will, no he won't dare say it, his precious land once again in the fires of war, no, never again, he would make sure of that. But there is a silver lining, he paused once more, again thinking before speaking, it's rare for all 5 Kages to come together like this, he again paused. What do you say? He said thinking of the most appropriate words. Until the threat of Akatsuki is gone. What would you think of forming a 5-village alliance? He said unsure of himself in his proposition. An alliance, the Raikage looked at it as an insult. I like it, Naruto said, this are bad times, cooperation is needed in bad times, Naruto said simply. Again the director of the summit thought before speaking. Quote, the chain of command should be uniform, the thought dawned on all the Kages. We want to avoid as much confusion as possible, Mifune said in his wise thinking once more. The thought was on each Kage's tongue. The Tsuchikage was the first to speak. So, the question is who will have authority over this new army, he said, voice filled with glee and hope. Mifune saw the pieces collect together, perhaps an alliance is within reach. You will only fight among yourselves, so I would like you to respect my position as a neutral party. Everyone nodded in agreement. This was a wise man. Every one in this room respected his ways of thinking. He must come up with the most plausible reason as who should lead an army like this. Mifune paused once more, the longest pause yet. He thought long and hard this time. He had ultimately made his decision. The only host left is Khan. The meeting was interrupted by the sudden swing of the large oak doors, what appeared no one expected in their entire life. Not even the wise Mifune was prepared for what he saw. A flash of green spandex. The brightest pair of teeth a person could ever possess. The greatest haircut known to man. He appeared with a bloodied Iwa headband held firmly in his hand. Hokage-sama, Lee began, out of breath, sweat-covered and out of breath, he must have traveled a long distance. What is the meaning of this? Tsuchikage said in insult to the intrusion. Even Mifune was disturbed by the disruption, even more so by what made the disruption, whatever it was. Sir, assassination, Lee said in between gasps of air. A flash of green spandex. The brightest pair of teeth a person could ever possess. The greatest haircut known to man. He appeared with a bloodied Aiwa headband held firmly in his hand. Hokage-sama, Lee began. Out of breath, sweat-covered and out of breath, he must have traveled a long distance. What is the meaning of this? Tsuchikage said in insult to the intrusion. Even Mifune was disturbed by the disruption, even more so by what made the disruption, whatever it was. Sir, assassination, Lee said in between gasps of air. Lee, explain yourself, Naruto said in perhaps the harshest tone he ever had addressed Lee in. He gasped for air for the next 5 or so seconds, the silence was deafening, he gathered himself together and bowed in respect to his superior and the other cages present. Sir, there was an incident, assassination sir, from one of the other villages. Now Naruto was concerned. Gaara sat up and listened intently. The other cages shifted slightly at the mention of a possibility of their participation in an assassination. Who is the victim? Naruto said, his eyes cringed in worry. He saw all the signs of an important person being involved here. They sent the fastest messenger that Konoha has available, interrupting a meeting of the highest importance. This was worrying indeed. Lee paused, worrying for the reaction of his friend and his leader. He was preparing himself to restrain Naruto if necessary. He approached Naruto closer, bent over to tell him straight to him face. He whispered the deceased name. He handed him the bloodied headband. Whispered his apologies. Naruto was still, silent and still, he didn't move. Lee placed a hand on his shoulder, trying to comfort him in some way. He brushed it off quickly. He wanted to do something. The headband in his hand revealing the accused, his mind was working well enough to know that it couldn't have been Aiwa. Why would they leave a headband, or could have been? Naruto looked down at his hands, he was shaking. He felt Neji and Shikamaru move to his sides, Lee still remaining behind him. They moved to comfort him or restrain him, he didn't know. Naruto slowly pulled a hand to his cheeks, to see if he was crying. He couldn't tell. His face was numb, his body shook with sadness. He didn't feel any tears, he wasn't crying. He went to his feet, his knees felt weak, horribly so. He left slowly, he didn't look up. He wouldn't dare to. He heard Mifune shout something, towards him he bet, he ignored it though. He looked down at the headband, the dark blue cloth was now a stained, ugly scarlet. The blood of one of his loved ones covering the symbol of Aiwa. He was near the door, so close, he ignored the looks of worry that the Mizukage shot at him. Gaara looked at him with a face mixed with concern and surprise. He told himself not to look up, but he did. He saw the Tsuchikage look at him with suspicion, and he detected a hint of happiness of him leaving. Then his imagination pulled him to the next level. He saw an image of the Tsuchikage holding a picture of Tsunade, pointing to it and handing it to some evil minion. He then pictured him, the Tsuchikage, handing the man the headband, as a symbol of strength. Then finally, the Tsuchikage laughing in victory, hearing the news of the successful mission. Naruto was about to move, about to hurt, to kill. But suddenly, a figure emerged from nowhere. His spiral mask twisted to his right hidden eye, his short jet black hair stood still as he looked down at the surprised and shocked cages. "Good morning," he said with as much charm as he could muster. "Akatsuki," the Raikage yelled as he smashed his foot to the ground. His body lifted and pounced towards the Rouge member. He pulled back his arm back and shot his arm off with an unmatched speed that only a cage could possess. "This is no ordinary Akatsuki," Naruto said with murder in his eyes. "Uchiha," Naruto spoke clearly as he could, the name bringing as much hate as it brought sorrow. "Madara Uchiha." The man stood his ground as the Raikage's fist passed by quicker than expected and as effective as a simple breeze. The Raikage pasted the masked man in a split second. His fist impacted the back wall and physics made their laws known as the wall shattered and crumpled underneath the strength of an enraged Raikage. Madara looked back with a sigh. The Raikage was one of his least favorite cages. So emotional, so quick to move and yet so slow to think. Madara had heard of the stubborn Naruto in his fiery head. Looking at the mon's still form and hard look, he had changed over the years. Or at least from his last update on the man. "My brother," the Raikage yelled as he emerged from the smoke of splintered wood and shattered stone. "Give him to me," he shouted. Now, even louder than the last. "You will listen to me," Madara said with a voice that sounded accustomed to giving orders and a look on his face that showed he had seen more power foes than him listen to the orders he barked. The Tsuchikage moved from his seat and pushed past his protectors. He gave an elderly cough and ignored a small screech in his hips. "Calm down, Raikage," he said with a disgusted look on his face. To act so brass, to be so impulsive in a situation like this, it simply disgusted him. It wouldn't hurt to listen to him. He followed as he saw foe, hidden by his orange mask. "For now, Tsuchikage, for now," Naruto spoke through clenched teeth, not glaring at the intruder, but at the Tsuchikage, with murder and revenge set heavily in his once calm eyes. "What are you here for?" the Mizukage said, pushing past her guards as she glared at the unnamed intruder. "My grand plan," he said with a chuckle. "My plan to end it all, beauty," he said with an approving eye as he stared at the Mizukage's figure. "Uchiha Madara," Naruto spoke as his gaze finally left the Tsuchikage's short body. "What are you doing here?" he said, not intimidated in one bit, completely confided in the abilities of his self and his underlings. "I can't believe you're still alive." "Uchiha Madara, unbelievable," the Tsuchikage said in disbelief. Then a thought came to mind. "Why is someone of your caliber?" He paused. Confident in addressing the legend for who he was and for who he is, going about this in such a roundabout manner, he said as both Mifune and Mei nodded in agreement. "As powerful as you are, you should be able to execute any plan without a hitch," he said, confident in his statement. He had seen him when he was far younger. He remembers the stories, the deaths that he had caused. The Uchiha chuckled lightly. He felt his wound, the wound his accursed rival granted him in a fight of skills that he unfortunately was the weaker of the two. "The wound inflicted by the Shodai Hokage," he said, feeling the wound that tore him from his once legendary skill. "How low he has fallen. It was quite amusing now, were to great, not that amusing now that he thinks about it. I am now a mere shell of my former self," he said as his hands rose, his head falling to look at his once powerful hands and what he could do in his younger years. "So this is your plan," the guard said with a huff. "To return yourself to your former strength," she said with a glare. Madara almost voiced a chuckle, quite unprofessional at a time like this. "You could say that," he said with pondering, "but that's not it at all," he said as he began to take a seat on the small ledge he stood near. "Just what is it you are plotting?" Mifune said with a snare. "Just what sort of plan is this, Madara?" "Not just any plan," he said with a hidden smirk. "The Moon Eye plan," he said with a sigh of relaxation, finally off his weary legs. "A grand name for a grand plan indeed," he said with a yawn. The Raikage gave an animalistic growl at the signs of boredom. "Show respect, damn it. I am so far from killing you, and now look at you sitting and yawning in front of the honorable Kages and myself," he said with a growl. "You do not give respect, Raikage, you earn respect," he said with that hidden smirk that, although unseen, made rage boil underneath his skin. "I am going to take my time. I am going to say this once and only once, so listen hard," he said as he stretched his legs and cleared his throat. "Everything will become one with me. It will be a perfect union. I will be complete." The room was silent. Not a voice was spoken, not a sound was heard. The oldest man in the room was the first to be taken back by the statement. The perfect union, become one. What does he want? What does this mean? "What does this all mean?" Naruto said, still seated, eyes focused on Madara's masked face. He coughed and cleared his throat one last time. "An ancient stone tablet has been pasted down. Through the Uchiha clan generations," he gave out a small unprofessional chuckle. "Even as we speak it remains beneath Konoha. Carved upon this ancient tablet are the secrets of the Rakudo sage," he said as the room filled with knowing gasps and confused looks. "Only those with powers," he said gesturing towards his eyes, "powers of the eye. Only they can read them." Madara spoke with a pause in his long speech. "More can be decoded when read under a series of different levels of Sharingan, but that's for another time," he said, continuing until he was interrupted by the old Kage. "The Rakudo sage is a mere fairy tale," the Tsuchikage said with an elderly stare, "a simple story told to children," he finished with a frown. "He really did exist," he said, basing a fact really, "and he did leave behind his tablet." The Raikage's muscles flexed with anger. "All this talking, and what progress has been made?" He palmed his feet, felt he was about to move until. "Keep to the subject. Whether this sage existed or not makes no difference to me. This plan of his is without a doubt real, so continue before my fellow Kage goes off the deep end," Naruto said, gesturing to the Raikage's enraged look about his face. His clenched teeth and closed fists. Madara smiled at the demon container. he was beginning to like him even more so. "Thank you, Hokage," he said as he rolled his shoulders, readying himself to reveal his grand plans. "Do any of you know why he became a legend?" he said, pausing as some nodded and some didn't. "And how he came to be worshipped as a god by shinobi everywhere," he said. "This is why I speak of the sage Hokage. This is the connection between my plan and the great Rakudo sage," he said in a storytelling voice. Mei stood up. "Uchiha Madara," he looked her way. His head titled slightly. "You have the Mangekyo Sharingan and there was someone in the Akatsuki with the Rinnegan," she spoke slowly. "Pain," Naruto said, informing Mei of the Rinnegan holder. "The one with the Rinnegan. His name is Pain," he said, the name that brought so many memories, so many memories. Mei looked worried towards the new Hokage. She looked back towards T. Uchiha. She spoke quietly. "You know everything, don't you?" she said, "about this great sage that everyone had heard of." "Tell us then," the Tsuchikage demanded. Madara looked at the Tsuchikage with a rather amused look about his masked face. Such a man to order him around, it was quite comical. He began slowly. "He once saved the world," he looked at Gaara, then Naruto, "from a monster." "A monster?" Gaara said, confused at such a generic term. "Cage, Hokage, this monster was sealed within you too," he said, amused with the sounds of gasps within the room. "Yes, it is a fusion of all the tailed beasts. And possesses the strongest chakra ever," he said, not at all surprised at the sound of absolute silence. It was true, when he found this out he was probably even more shocked than all of the other present. This monster, the 10-tailed beast, the Jubi. Gaara looked shocked. Naruto's anger was replaced momentarily with surprise, the demon sealed within the young blonde Roa. Red with anger at the mention of that dreaded name, the 10-tailed, a being stronger than the Kyuubi, unbelievable. Temari, probably the most outspoken person among the people present, spoke her mind. Her voice was shaky and uncertain. "There is a beast, with more tails than the Kyuubi," she said, confused at the statement. "I just told you, didn't I?" he said in an almost teasing voice. "It is a Fusi, one of all 9 of the beasts," Madara spoke again. "But how?" Naruto said, stomach burning at the mere mention of the name. "The 9-tailed beasts are nothing more than a division of the almighty Jubi's chakra," he said, looking around at the confused faces surrounding him. "And the Rakudo sage, he was the one to do it, the one that divided Jubi," Madara said without a tone of respect. "I don't like where this is heading," Kankuro said, whispering to his sister. He spoke up, for Madara and everyone to hear. "So is that why Akatsuki has been gathering the tailed beasts," he said, hoping to bring out the plans that the Akatsuki had prepared over the years. Madara was ready for it all to be known. In order to protect the world from the Jubi, the Rakudo sage developed a new jutsu. Madara spoke through his hollow mask. The jutsu is still in use today, as the host seal system. For what seemed like the 50th time today, several members present gasped at the name of the jutsu. "Yes, the Rakudo sage was the Jubi's container," he said. "He sealed the Jubi within his own body, in order to control it." Madara spoke, clear and smooth like, and so selfless, the mere thought of self-sacrifice. CE was truly astounding to the people here. Naruto was at a loss, even he didn't know if he could do that. The Kyuubi was forced upon him. Sure, his father had sacrificed himself, but to choose to live a life that he lived, that Gaara lived. Even Naruto doubted he would choose to seal an even more powerful demon in his gut. Having saved the world from the Jubi, the sage was worshipped as a god, Madara said. His voice soon to a turn, but the Jubi's chakra was so great that the seal would break the second the Rakudo sage died and it would once again wreak havoc upon the land. He paused. Knowing that on his deathbed the sage used the last of his strength to divide the Jubi's chakra and spread them across the land, he paused once more, the information soaking in. Then the Jubi's empty body as sealed away and sent to the sky where no one could ever reach it. Madara paused once again. There it became the moon. Naruto looked around the room, clearly blindsided by the information. He saw T. Hat Temari looked away when Madara revealed the origins of the moon, out of awe, shock or disbelief he did not know. The scale is too huge, far too huge for any one man to do that, the Raikage's bodyguard said, pushing away the look of disbelief off his face. Madara looked down at the boy. He sniffed at him. Having become one with the Jubi, the Rakudo sage was already more than human, he said simply. Mifune spoke up, completely unafraid with the presence of AS rank shinobi. I understand now, he said quickly. Madara looked at the old commando. That you want to gather the beast's eye, in order to gain their inhuman power, he said, but was confused. But, what will you do with that power, Uchiha? Mifune said with an accusing finger. And so he finally revealed it, his plans, the plans to change all of mankind. I will revive the Jubi, step 1. I will then become its host, step 2. And with its power, I will be able to strengthen my eyes to a higher level unknown since the days of the Rakudo sage, step 3. And finally I will be able to cast a certain jutsu, he said, finishing his diabolical plan. The Tsuchikage looked insulted at the thought, a jutsu powered by the strength of 10 tails of pure chakra. A certain jutsu, he looked confused at this. What is it? What are you planning to do? He demanded once more. Madara looked down at the short man, upset again at the tone this man spoke to him in. It is the most powerful illusion ever, he said, leaving it to the imagination of who was present. The ability to project my eye onto the moon. Mugen Tsukiyomi. Then I will be able to cast an illusion over everyone on earth. Silence surrounded the room. I will control everyone with my illusion and the world will become one. The silence continues. A world without ill will or strife. Silence, everything will be one in me. Not a sound was made. Madara's voice echoed within the large room, which within that moment seemed so small. Everything will be united. That is my plan. That is my moon's eye plan. The Raikage's rage could no longer be held down anymore. He slammed his fists down to the desk, which surprisingly held its own. You Mew, saint be kidding, he shouted. I want hand the world over to you, he continued to shout. Gaara hands unfolded, he lifted himself to his feet and spoke as smoothly as he could, but the thought of what this man wanted to commit. This man wanted full control, he wanted order in its purest form. Peace under the illusion is not true peace, he said as he thought each word out before speaking, to at the Vey. Rai least convince this man against his plans. It's only meaningful if the real world manages to accomplish it, he said, explaining the best and only way for the world to achieve peace. Mei stood up looking directly at the Akatsuki leader. And what does that hold for us? She said, glaring at the man. There is no hopes or dreams, it's just an escape, she pleaded. Tsuchikage stood, making really no difference in terms of stature. Make the world one, he said quietly, remembering what the old war hawk said. Danzo spoke of something similar, but he pushed these thoughts away. In your case, it sounds more like you want to make the world yours, he accused. Madara found this to be quite a funny accusation for some reason. The Tsuchikage snared at this. Madara replied quickly with a quick laugh. Ha 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 ha, and what have you 5 cages been able to accomplish? He didn't wait for a reply, he was nearly out of steam with this ignorant bunch. You must understand, there is no hope. Hope is nothing more than resignation. That is, what is, not real, he said in a voice filled with wisdom and understanding. Unfortunately this tone was voicing the end of all humanity. Give me the Hachibi and the Kyuubi, he said casually. And cooperate with my plan, he continued with this casual tone that infuriated the Tsuchikage and Raikage. If not, it shall be war, he said, looking away at something that caught his interest for a moment. War, Gaara said, somewhat in shock, as if that declaration had no meaning. War, how, why? The declaration went unnoticed by the Raikage. What didn't go unnoticed was the demands that Madara set. The Hachibi, what do you mean? You already took B. Hachibi, why would he want something that he should already have? Does this mean we failed to capture the Hachibi? Madara explained, he is the perfect host, he said, praising the 8 tails. I had expected nothing less of your brother. The Raikage's face was unmoving with several twitches here and there. One of the Raikage's bodyguards sighed and shook his head. Naruto heard something of I knew it, rumbling among them. That fool, the Raikage yelled the loudest he ever had shouted. He used this as an excuse to leave the village and gallivant about. Naruto thought that the Raikage sent his chakra towards his voice box. Hearing a man yell this loud was inhuman. I won't let him get away with this. Naruto stared directly at Madara, expecting him to jump within the moment. And what of me? Naruto said, eyeing the Akatsuki leader out, his guards moving to his sides, Lee to his left. Neji his right, and Shikamaru was lazing in the back, eyes strategically closed. Temari brought out her sealing scroll, readying herself for battle. Mei stretched her arms out, herself readying for a fight. She looked to her side. Temari was looking at Naruto in a way that she was uncomfortable with. A lion in her stomach roared in aggression. a possible contender for Naruto's affection, she was in no mood. Especially for a man as rare as Naruto. I won't let you take Uzumaki Naruto, Gaara said, not at all ashamed at his announcement. Suna is behind my decisions. Temari nodded in the background. She wouldn't let him take Naruto, she would doubt her reasons later, her instinct said to protect that man and she will. With the power of myself and my country Uzumaki Naruto will be under our protection, she said as she felt the lion in her roar inside. I am in no mood for a simple battle that needs to be fought in another time, he said shrugging at the thought. And you, Raikage, Tsuchikage said looking at the Raikage. I have no quarrel with the Hokage, I am after my brother so that I can kill him myself, the Raikage said huffing after one of his several outbursts. Madara was out of patience. He was nearly through with these common folk. I may not have any power myself, but I have the power of the beasts that I have gathered, he said. You do not stand a chance. Gaara stood up tired of his attempts of undermining himself and his followers. We won't give up, he declared. All right then, consider this a declaration of war, the Fourth Shinobi War begins now. The Fourth Shinobi War, Tsuchikage said in a somewhat surprised tone, you cannot be serious. And now his patience was over with, he had enough, they know his demands and his declaration has been made. I'm not a fool to say such a thing in jest, he said looking away. The Raikage looked at Madara with had caused all this, his brother would be safe if it wasn't for this man, he hated this man. Next time we meet it shall be in the battlefield, he said disappearing into a swirl of space and time. Onoki held his elderly hips in pain, he was getting too old for this junk. Oh dear, what shall we do now? Onoki asked no one in particular. Gaara stood to the question, beating Mifune to the punch. We must form a shinobi alliance, he said calmly, less worried without the presence of Madara. There is no other way to oppose the power of seven-tailed beasts. Gaara looked around. The Raikage looked reluctant, Mizukage seemed concerned, Naruto remained still and unmoving. This was not good news. The Mizukage spoke up. I recall that you were against the idea, Raikage, she said with a small smirk. The Raikage reluctance seemed to fade as his hardened face softened somewhat. It seems no harm has come across my brother, but I refuse to allow Akatsuki to have their ways with us any longer, he said in the calmest voice he had ever presented to the other cages. We form a shinobi alliance. And settle this as quickly as possible, he said quickly. Select a search party at once and contact the village so that they can begin a full search at once, he barked at his underlings who nodded and jumped off. The Mizukage spoke up once more. In order to put a stop to Madara's operation, we must on no account permit him to obtain the Hachibi or Kyuubi, she sighed. Looking once at the Raikage and lastly at Naruto, who looked unprovoked at the thought of Madara hunting him down. As such, it seems more prudent for our shinobi alliance to locate the Hachibi before Madara does. And hide him away from Madara. Gaara and Mifune agreed. Chojuro nodded nervously. Why, you have got that right, if he were to revive that Jubi monster. The Tsuchikage shook his head. No, the power of the seven-tailed beasts that Madara has collected is beyond imagining. He continued to shake his head. And he may have some kind of jutsu or other secret plan up his sleeve that makes use of those demons. Onoki didn't like this, not one bit. I doubt he would be so confident otherwise, one of Onoki's larger bodyguards said. We know that the Namikaze here shall be a part of the war effort. But what of the Hachibi? We should use him as a vital part of the war effort, the Tsuchikage reasoned, which to Gaara seemed reasonable, but very risky. Unthinkable, Gaara stated. Protecting the Hachibi should be vital to our chances at winning the war. I suspect the reason Madara has decided to start this war using these 7 beasts he has collected is because in his weakened state. And with the few Akatsuki members remaining, it would be too difficult for him to capture the Hachibi and the Kyuubi. Even if he succeeded, the risks would be too high, Gaara explained. He may be thinking of using this war as a way of luring his targets out, Gaara reasoned. Before the Mizukage would have been with the cage, his reasoning was sound and his facts were facts. But that lion within her stomach growled at the thought of upsetting her man, especially with the thought of another woman prying her way into his strong arms. She answered unsurely and uncertain, a small wither in her voice. Maybe. I am not too sure. I agree with the cage, the Raikage said, returning to his loud and emotional self. Hokage, I have no measurements of your powers, but I have heard stories. You are efficient enough to handle yourself, he said, adding some emphasis to the word efficient. But I will not lay my brother's head before the eyes of my enemies. Very well, do you accept Tsuchikage-sama, Hokage-sama, that we shall capture and restrain the Hachibi and hold him in a protective environment? May asked the short elder and the young blonde. I will share information on Killer Bee with Iwa, Kiri, Suna and Konoha. I suggest that teams be organized and mobilized. Immediately, the Raikage barked. Once the Hachibi is found, I suggest that you send add information to me, he said in a somewhat threatening voice. I am probably the only person my brother will actually listen to, he suggested. The Raikage settled down as the room went quite quickly. We must know that even if we secure the Hachibi and protect them with the force of our alliance, if that alliance is annihilated it will all have been meaningless, he paused. That is why I say, it would be more advantageous to us if we were to send him into battle from the start, working alongside the alliance's forces. The Raikage looked reluctant to do what his fellow Kage told him. Are you sure about that? Onoki looked at the new voice. Mifune spoke with raised hands. We see here before us is the formation of the first ever Shinobi Alliance. Its power is, I am sorry, Mifune. Naruto spoke up after his brief period of silence. He had heard enough. I, the Rokudaime Hokage, have heard enough, he said, hand clenching the bloodied headband. My forces will stand on high guard. Any information about the 8 tails will be sent to the other cages immediately, and Suna, your participation in this alliance will in no way affect our personal alliance. He paused. May the Mizukage was the first to speak up. What are you saying? Naruto looked up. Konoha will not be a part of this alliance. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, spam red hearts in comment box. He spoke about